Night has covered the city. The streetlights have dimmed, as if they too are tired after a long day. In a small room, only the soft glow of a night lamp and the ticking of the clock remain. You lie there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. A part of you wants to rest, but another part, the one that always stays alert, begins to speak. It replays unfinished sentences, old conversations, things left undone, and worries that do not yet have names. You try turning to the left, to the right, adjusting your pillow, counting your breaths, but the more you count, the more awake your mind becomes. The harder you try to sleep, the further away sleep drifts. Have you ever felt like this? When the night comes, it is not that your body does not want to sleep, but that your mind is not ready to let go. It races through the alleys of memory, stirs up dust on old moments, and quietly raises 1,000 questions. Am I on the right path? What if I fail tomorrow? Do they still remember me? Each question is like a wave crashing onto the peaceful shore you are trying to protect. And even though you are lying still, you feel yourself drifting, not on your bed, but across an ocean of thoughts. But maybe, you do not need to stop those waves. You do not need to fight your mind. Because sometimes, all you need to do is listen. Listen like hearing the wind pass over the rooftop. Listen like hearing an old story told beside a fire, where someone sits in silence, speaks only when needed, and lets the quiet say the rest. Tonight, you are not alone. These Zen stories will walk with you through the space between wakefulness and dreams, where the mind is allowed to slow down, where thoughts are seen without needing to be chased away. You no longer need to try to sleep. You just need to be here, in every breath, in every sound, in every soft rhythm of storytelling. Let tonight be a different kind of beginning. A night where you do not need to win the battle in your head, but simply get to touch the stillness that has been waiting for you. Close your eyes. Exhale slowly. And listen. Now, let your shoulders soften. Feel the weight of the day slowly melt away from your body. There is no need to adjust your position. Just allow yourself to lie still. The pillow beneath your head, the blanket over your body, they are enough. You do not need to change anything. Let your body be allowed to rest, and your mind be allowed to slow down. Inhale deeply, and exhale slowly. Each exhale is a release, a permission to let go of all that has clung to you throughout the day. Feel your breath like a gentle breeze moving through your chest, through your belly, and dissolving at your lips. Do not force yourself to breathe deeply. Just let it be as natural as it wants to be. Every breath is a heartbeat of life, and every heartbeat is an invitation to return to yourself. Try listening to the sounds around you. Perhaps the steady whir of a fan, the insects outside the window, or the ticking of the clock. These sounds are not distractions. They are part of the stillness. In the world of meditation, stillness does not mean complete silence. It means no longer needing to push any sound away. Now, imagine you are lying on a soft field of grass under a wide open night sky. The moon sparkles above, and tiny fireflies glow gently around you. A breeze drifts past, light as an unnamed touch. You hear the leaves rustling softly, the ripples of water in a distant lake. No one is asking anything of you. There is no work, no deadline, no one waiting for a reply. There is only you, your breath, and the night gently holding it all. If a thought appears, do not try to chase it away. Just watch it like a cloud crossing the sky. It comes, it floats, and then it fades. No need to hold on, and no need to run. Every thought is a visitor, and you are the host who smiles as they pass. When you stop fighting the mind lets go on its own. When you stop forcing sleep, sleep will find you on its own. Now, let your eyes stay closed. No need to count, no need to measure. Just let your breath follow its own rhythm. Feel your whole body settling down, like a leaf drifting onto still water. All the tension in your neck, your back, your heart, melting away with each breath. You are not your thoughts. You are not your worries. You are the one sitting quietly in the rain of the mind, watching each drop fall clear and light. Tonight, there is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. Just be here, in this moment, within each breath, within the gentle glow of peace. Let your mind lie down with your body. Let stillness begin with your breath. And as your heart quiets, the Zen stories will begin, light as the wind, slow as the moon, and deep as the sleep that is drawing near. Story 1: The Candle Within. Night in a small village always arrives earlier than in the city. When the roosters have ceased crowing and the pale scent of kitchen smoke melts into the mist, the dirt path leading up to the stone hermitage on the hillside carries only the footsteps of the latecomer. The young man pauses on the seventh stone step, his hands still not letting go of some invisible grip over his chest. He has practiced meditation for many weeks. Each evening he sits for long hours yet finds no peace. He records every breath, counts every heartbeat, striving to remember the advice from books that say, relax. But that very trying to relax makes his shoulders stiff like a rock pounded by rain all season long. The hermitage door is cracked open. The glow of an oil lamp inside spills out as a thin blade of light on the damp ground, as though someone has just carved a narrow slit into the night. He knocks, not knowing exactly what he has come to ask, only carrying a nameless fatigue, fear that he is not enough, fear of failure tomorrow, fear of missing his beat, fear that others move faster while he stands still. The teacher opens the door. His aged face is calm, like a winter leaf that has decided to stay on its branch for one more night. Without asking, he walks straight to a wooden table, takes out a small half-used candle whose wick is black like a delicate ink mark. He does not light it. He places the candle into the young man's palm and says, "Take it with you. Do not light it yet. Go down the hill, walk around through the village, and come back." The young man is confused, about to speak of darkness, dense mist, rough paths, but the teacher has already turned inside, closing the door, and the lamp's glow recedes from the crack like tide withdrawing from a stream. He stands alone under the eaves, hears insects sewing the night's robe, then clasps the candle and steps down. Each stone pad seems to ask, "What foolish deed are you doing?" But his feet move, and soon his eyes grow accustomed to darkness as though darkness itself were a kind of light on the far side of the moon. At the foot of the hill lies a small lane hugging a patch of rice paddy. This season, the rice has been harvested, and the fresh scent of straw hangs green in the air. He passes by the old woman who still sells sticky rice cakes early in the market, sees a pot of cooled ash in her yard. He continues past the corrugated roofs of a young couple's home, where a hammock swings softly between two porch posts. Perhaps someone is rocking a child inside. Unconsciously, he realizes his hand is gripping the candle too tightly, as if terrified it will fall, break, lose its unlit light entirely. He loosens his grip. The candle rests quietly. Even when unlit, the candle is still a candle, he thinks, and that sentence flows through him like a bottomless stream. He comes to a canal bank, where a willow tree's branches droop to the water's surface. The water is flat like cold glass. He bends to peer in and sees his reflection, dimmer than the image in his mind. In his mind, he always appears as someone running from mistakes, running toward expectations, chasing the footsteps of others. In the reflection, he is merely a long dark stripe, trembling in the breeze. He raises the candle, unconsciously brushing the wick with his fingertip. A bit of soot clings. He wipes it on his shirt. The soot spreads into a faint smudge, like the drip of an unfamiliar bird that landed and flew off too quickly. Do not light it, he reminds himself, and he notices something strange. The village still sleeps. The path remains dark, but he no longer feels lacking in light. Somewhere, the night itself knows its own luminosity, not dazzling, not blazing, just enough to see the way. People in towns forget this light because electric lamps overwhelm it. Here, it is subtle, deep, healing like a mother's hand upon a fevered brow. Walking further, he meets an old man sitting on a doorway step, gazing out into the garden, holding a small knife carving a piece of wood. The old man does not look up as he passes, he just says to himself, "Wet wood will not take fire." The young man wants to ask what that means, but the old man remains silent. The knife scrapes the grain softly, the sound like whispering voices in a dream. He carries that phrase and the candle in his hand as he continues his round of the village. Returning to the foot of the hill, the mist is thicker. On the upward path, he no longer counts his steps. An old thought surfaces then sinks again. All good things need ripening. Impatience is just fire striking the shell. He does not know where he learned that. Maybe a thin half-read book. Maybe in his father's sigh in a bad harvest year. Yet tonight it returns as a bird finding its proper nest. He knocks on the hermitage door again. The teacher opens promptly, as though waiting behind, certain he would return just when the wind changed direction. Without question, the teacher hands him a match. "Now light it," he says. The young man slowly strikes it. The small flame flickers in the breeze like a child learning to stand. When the tip of the match touches the wick, the flame catches, grows upward, standing steady, neither glaring nor too dim. The teacher does not look at the candle. He looks at the young man's face. "What do you see?" The young man hesitates. "Master, a candle." The teacher shakes his head gently. "What do you see inside you?" The young man is silent, as though someone placed a new mirror before him. In the small glow, he sees his anger no longer spiking, his fear no longer twitching like a taut string. He is surprised to realize the darkness in the hermitage did not vanish entirely, it stood in place, then retreated slightly, then stood again, as a courteous person yielding passage rather than being pushed out. Light need not conquer, the teacher says, it only needs to stand in the right place. He looks down at the candle and recalls the old man's words. Wet wood will not take fire. Somewhere inside him, wood long soaked by tears of worry begins to dry. The teacher motions for him to set the candle on the table. The two sit facing each other. The oil lamp remains unlit. Only the candle, like a second heart placed between them, pulses in rhythm with its light. "Why have you come?" the teacher asks, in the calm voice of one asking the weather. "I am restless," the young man replies. "Every night is the same. I fear I am not enough. I fear repeating mistakes. I fear I will fail tomorrow. I fear others moving far ahead." The teacher nods. "You speak many fears. So do you have a seeing?" The young man considers. "I see. I am living like a night guard," he says slowly, counting and protecting chests labeled expectation, achievement, reputation. "I fear thieves. I fear loss." The teacher smiles. "Then you are guarding all night. No wonder you do not sleep." That simple statement emerges like a bolt clicking into place. He laughs, for the first time in weeks, a laugh without the metallic taste in his tongue. "On your round with the candle, what did you see in the village?" the teacher asks. He recounts. The old woman's house, the child's hammock, the canal bank, the willow, the soot on his shirt, the old man carving, the phrase about wet wood. The teacher says, "Very good. Now try to blow the candle out." Surprised, he does so. The flame bows and then goes out, leaving a thin wisp of smoke curling in the air. The scent of warm wax and burned wick drifts by like the fragrance of a memory neither happy nor sad. "Now look around," the teacher says. "Is this night different than the night you first arrived?" Slowly he scans. Darkness returns, but it is no longer heavy. Somewhere, his eyes have grown wider, more accepting, and thus, needing less light. "I see more," he says, "though the candle is out." The teacher nods. "That is the work of the candle. It does not bind you to itself. It teaches you how to see." He thinks of tomorrow's unfinished report, the demanding manager, the casual comparison from a friend, the tiny scratch in his pride that he has so diligently hidden. All of these seem to stand in line at the hermitage gate, waiting to be named, waiting for a pass. This may sound strange, he says slowly, but just now, when I lit the candle, I saw the not enough in me sit down. It is tired. It only wants a seat, not to command the room. The teacher tilts his head. You can give it a chair and a cup of tea. He laughs. Serve fear tea? The teacher laughs too, the wrinkles at his eye corners like handwritten lines still in ink after years. It is only a hungry child. Feed it, and it sleeps. Do not scare it. Do not starve it. Do not offer it candy of expectations. Do not punish it with cruel silence. Just place before it a warm cup of tea and say, sit here. Tonight you do not need to guard. I will sit with you. He looks at the candle wick, now a little blacker. The teacher says, each night, before sleep, light a candle in your heart rather than on the table. No flame is needed. You just need to remember how you feel now. The light does not fight darkness. It stands in the right place. You place your breath there. You do not push away thoughts. You let them see one another in that light. Try naming the visitors who come. The late fear, the night guard, the endlessly asking child. Then invite them to sit. Pour them tea. They will shout less when they are seen and seated. He asks, what if they refuse to sit? The teacher shrugs. Add another chair. Both laugh again. The laughter gentle as the echo after a candle is blown out, but the warmth lingers. After a while, the teacher stands, lights the candle again, then places before him a small piece of paper. On it are 4 lines in brown ink, thin as leaf veins. See, name, invite, breathe together. The teacher says, your exercise for 7 nights. Each night do just these 4 things. No additions, no judgments, no need for success. If you fall asleep halfway, that is a good sign. It means you are learning to trust the night. He repeats in his mind. See, name, invite, breathe together. Simple as 4 footsteps on dry earth. He suddenly realizes. In the past month he has run instead of walking, preached instead of breathing, rummaged the edge of drawers searching for a key that has always rested in his shirt pocket. Before he goes back down the hill, the teacher returns the candle. Take it with you. No match, no lighting. Just remember, sometimes a candle is to see your own faults. Sometimes to light the path for another, but most of the time, the candle is to help you know there is already warmth enough inside you. He holds the candle and feels his hand lighten, as when holding someone's hand without needing to speak. He bows, turns his back, steps off the threshold. The mist has thinned. Above, the clouds part, and a few stars peek out like salt grains falling into the night. The path down the hill is not brighter than before, but his steps feel surer, his breath deeper, and the voices inside, for the first time, lower their volume. He passes by the young couple's home. The hammock is still. Perhaps the child sleeps. He realizes sleep is not a locked room, but an open porch. When there is someone gently, patiently watching over, even cries will soften into steady breath. Tonight, I will watch over myself. He thinks quietly and finds the thought is not pitiable, but tender, like a small promise. A few steps later he sees the old man carving wood again. The old man looks up. His eyes shine like 2 clean glass buttons. The night has seen you now, he says. The night will guide you. He nods in thanks, asks no more. Some words, if questioned further, will tear. Back in his room, he places the candle on the sill of the window. He does not turn on a lamp. He sits on his bed, back against the wall, hands on his thighs. No counting, no monitoring. He lets breath move in and out as though at home. A thought taps. Tomorrow? He invites it in, offers a chair. Another thought. They have moved so far. He pours tea for it. Another. Maybe I will never be enough. He looks it in the eye, sees it shrink, small as a stone long underwater. Retrieved, cleansed of moss, set to dry on the windowsill. In the darkness he smiles. smiling not because he has won, but because there is no need to fight anymore. Somewhere in his chest, a candle without smoke is kindled, not flashy, not demanding an audience, needing no praise for its glow. It is just warm enough for a heart to stop trembling. It is just bright enough for sleep to return home. Night flows past like a boat that makes no waves. He does not remember exactly when he sank into sleep, only that beforehand he had time to place 4 chairs around an invisible table, invite 4 boisterous guests to sit, and pour each one a cup of tea. On the threshold of dreams he hears a whisper, very faint, from the teacher, from the old man, or from himself. When the mind stops watching itself, it shines by itself, and then everything dissolves into a gentle darkness, where shadow is no longer enemy, where light is no longer a weapon, where a young person stops guarding stores, lays down the whole warehouse, stops keeping watch, sleeps like grass, like rain, like a candle burned just enough to remember, and just extinguished to rest. Story 2: The Steps That Do Not Count. Steps. In the afternoon at the riverside town there is a kind of light all its own. It is not blazing gold like sun on sand, nor cold silver like city sunshine. It is like the breath of the water, and every ripple seems to push the light outward a little further. On the slope leading to an old house, there are mossy green stone steps, and a young woman stops, gripping the handle of her basket as though she holds onto an invisible anchor. She has lived for so long in the habit of counting. Everything in her life is categorized, numbered, arranged into small mental drawers. Morning, she counts the tasks waiting. On the way to work, she counts words that should be spoken and words that should be withheld. At night, she counts the errors of the day, the missed chances, the unreadable glances. Some nights, she counts even the ticking of the clock until it becomes bold print in her weary mind. When others talk about journeys, she counts how much time and money a trip would consume. When others talk about the future, she counts the distance from now to the dream, then draws a cold straight line with her pen. She counts everything to feel safe, yet that safety never comes. It feels like a train car rolling backward while you still hear the station up ahead. The old house belongs to her aunt, a woman so unhurried that her tea stays warm longer than usual. Aunt opens the door. The scent of dried pomelo leaves from the loft drifts out like an unvoiced greeting. The house has a wide porch, with a bamboo chair curved into the shape of someone who often sits there. The middle stone step is polished bright from countless feet. The young woman sets down her basket, touches the edge of the step, and feels as though she touches the rim of a memory that does not belong to any one person. Aunt pours tea and invites her to sit, without asking why she came or how long she will stay. The aunt's silence is not probing. It is the kind of silence that trusts every question will find its answer in time. She sits, gazing at the garden where a starfruit tree bears fruit. The wind stirs leaves, and their sound is like gentle hands smoothing lines on a forehead. As dusk nears, Aunt gives her a ring of old keys. She says, in her everyday voice, husky from sipping warm water, that somewhere at the end of the porch there is a small room, which holds an old clock that stopped long ago. She says that if she is free, she may go see it. The young woman takes the keys, feeling as though she has been given a map with no legend. She opens that small room. The scent of old wood and polish still lingers, reminding her of the last time she touched something older than herself. The clock sits in the middle of the room, its glass face slightly dusty, its hands frozen at an unknown hour. She strokes the glass. Her reflection is soft and blurred, as though she is a figure trying to pierce mist to meet herself. Beneath is the clock box, with a little door. She opens it, discovering the mainspring and a coil of metal aged by time. She returns to the porch and tells her aunt the clock is stuck. Aunt simply smiles, and says that the clock belonged to their grandfather, who once said, "Before something can run true, first it must know how to stand still." The remark enters her ears without triggering immediate reaction. It lies there like a seed seeking a fertile soil. Aunt says that if she likes, tomorrow morning she might come down to the riverbank with her. There is a wooden bridge made by villagers. Stepping on it feels like walking atop faint echoes of old time. In the morning they go to the riverbank. The early mist is thick. Across the river the far bank appears like slanted writing on thin paper. The wooden bridge steps down to the water without drowning anyone. Each plank smells of different weather. One smells of ripe grain, another damp from recent rain. Aunt walks slowly. She follows behind, still tethered to her habit of counting steps. She counts from the first plank up to the 17th, then the 30th. By the time she reaches the middle, she loses count because the sound of water underneath talks too much. She becomes irritated at losing her rhythm. Aunt glances back, not at her irritation, but into her eyes, and suggests she try walking without counting. She listens, though in her mind the numbers still hop like a flock of birds flying one fixed direction. She takes another step and realizes the creak of wood has its own rhythm, not to be controlled, only to be heard. She becomes still and listens. The more she listens, the more she realizes each creak is a key unlocking a small door inside her chest. Behind that door is not a storehouse of commands as she believed, but a wide porch with wind. That afternoon, they have lunch on the porch. Aunt takes from a room a small paper bundle, opens it, and reveals a handful of rusted nails and a few unnamed metal bits. She says that long ago her grandfather assembled the clock with his own hands. When he first finished, he tested it day and night to see if the hands would keep rhythm. But one night, grandmother said the ticking would not let anyone sleep. He responded without anger. He opened the clock, relieved some tension in the spring, and moved it to a small room with closed doors, letting the ticking become a lullaby rather than a driving force. She recounts this matter-of-factly, as though every story's purpose is simply how to live together at home. Upon hearing this, the young woman feels her throat heat. She understands. Over the years, she has turned the ticking in her head into the urging of an imagined jailer. She chased that urging, so sleep always came late. Aunt looks at her, does not ask what she is thinking, only pours more tea as if pouring a pocket of silence. As evening falls, the young woman returns to the clock room once more. She removes the glass face, gently wipes it with a soft cloth. With each swipe, her image grows clearer, and the wrinkles at her eye corners naturally look like small roads leading out to fields. She checks the mainspring, gently turns it a little. The hands move, then stop again. She is not disappointed. She remembers the saying about standing still. She closes her eyes, rests her hand on the wooden case. The wood warms as though breathing. She thinks of the wooden bridge, of the creaking rhythm. Without conscious choice, she opens the little door of the clock box and places inside a slip of paper. On it she writes 4 simple words. Stop counting now. She does not know why, only feels lighter after doing it. That first night staying with her aunt, the young woman intends to stay awake and test whether she still counts. But that test never happens. As insects start changing the tune, as mist touches the window panes, her eyes gently close. In quiet sleep she dreams she walks on a broad dirt road with no signs, no painted lines, no destination printed in letters. She walks and nobody tells her to go faster. She walks and no one stands along the road to applaud or judge. The road opens beneath her feet as if it were a gentle river willing to shift course if needed. She awakes in the night not from worry, but because of a strange peace. That peace is not frightening. It is like entering a dark room and knowing exactly where you stand, though you see nothing. The following days pass in that manner, gentle and slow. Every morning she brews tea in the way her aunt taught. The water does not have to roar to a boil. It only needs to bubble enough to form tiny fisheye bubbles. Tea leaves do not need strong bruising, only a gentle touch to awaken their fragrance. When she pours, her hand keeps warm. Her eyes follow the flow like she watches a road in rain. In that small ritual, she realizes she can live without counting. She can approximate without numbers. She can feel without concluding. Every afternoon she returns to the riverbank, crosses the wooden bridge, this time without counting. She steps to the creeks. When she reaches mid-bridge, she stops and looks at the water. The river reflects the sky in its own way. When wind comes, the sky and the water fractures. When there is no wind, the sky and the water is whole. She knows she does not have to chase the fragments anymore. One rainy afternoon, her aunt asks her to help repair the clockroom's door. The hinge is misaligned. Each time it closes, it emits a dry screech. They remove the hinge, clean it, oil it, reattach it. Aunt holds the screwdriver like a pen. She says that everything has its own rhythm, if one works in the right rhythm. One needs no force. She holds the door. Aunt tightens a screw. Everything fits together with light pressure. The young woman looks at her aunt's hands and sees in them a time that cannot be counted. It is the time of understanding, of staying near an object long enough for it to recognize it is being treated kindly. She is moved. In her mind, she sees how many things in her life she has used as tools only to conquer ends. She silently apologizes to them, a kind of apology that needs no answer. On the last day before leaving her aunt's house, the young woman enters the clockroom again. She gently winds the clock. The hands move a bit. She makes no effort to have it run perfectly. She closes the door, hears the latch click quietly like a greeting. She opens the box, retrieves the slip of paper she had placed before, reads its 4 words. She smiles, folds that paper, puts it in her pocket, and in its place writes a new slip, step before listening to step. She feels she learned that from the wooden bridge and the mossy green step. When she goes out to the porch, her aunt has tea ready. Aunt asks her whether she brought the stone steps with her. She laughs, says the steps are always before the threshold of her heart, and nods without further words. She returns to the city late one evening. The lights here are like infinite drops of digital rain. She passes long rows of cars, hurried faces, windows that reflect different versions of the same person. On the way home, the old impulse to count surfaces like an old habit wanting to return. She recognizes it immediately and invites it to the back seat. She tells it to sit still, not drive. At home, she does not open her phone right away. She walks straight to the window sill, leans back, letting the city's darkness pass through her without asking whence it came. When the wall clock begins its ticking, she does not count it. She listens. The tick has a pace. That pace does not push. It quietly reminds that beneath every plan there is a current. She sticks a note beside her bed with 4 words. See, stop, then see. She places her hand on her chest, exhales long, and within a few breaths, sleep arrives like a familiar friend, knocks twice gently, then enters. The next morning at work, she tries not to count the possible mistakes. She writes an email without measuring every word. She speaks a sentence without weighing each thought. Strangely, things do not fail. On the contrary, there is laughter at the other end of the line. There is a quiet thank you. There is a space that does not need to be filled by perfection. At noon, she stands by the office window, looks down on the crowds. Each person is a rhythm. Each rhythm is its own song. The city, it turns out, has its own wooden bridge. Only that bridge is built by accepting gazes. She realizes she can walk through each day without counting how far until night. That night, before sleep, she takes out the slip of paper from her aunt's house. She does not read it aloud. She places it under her pillow as one might place a pomelo leaf for scent. She places her hand over the invisible stone step in her heart. Feeling the green stone's cool solidity, she closes her eyes and listens again to the creaks of the bridge, the river's murmur, her aunt's gentle breathing beside the tea, and the clock hand inching forward then pausing. All those sounds gather into a deep silence, where no number dangles like a bell reminding of tasks. In that silence she perceives a simple truth. A lifetime can travel very far simply by placing each step right in front of the threshold, without needing to count. And when that threshold is no longer a place to step but a place to sit, one begins to hear the night whisper unnamed words. She drifts into sleep with that feeling, unaware of when exactly the slumber comes. She only knows that at one moment, between the exhale and the inhale, there exists an infinitely small gap where all calculations snap. That gap is enough for a person to stop being the counter of herself and begin to be the one who sits and listens on the porch. And there, in the gentle darkness of the room, the steps that do not count steps have kept their promise. They lead her through the night along a road needing no traffic light, only a heart that knows how to listen. Story 3: The Garden That Needs No Nameplate. That night, the garden behind the monastery smelled of freshly watered earth, of young lemon leaves bent by the wind releasing a thin layer of fragrance, of the dampness from a shallow stream running beneath the bamboo bank, and of insects blending into a symphony unled yet perfectly timed. The young gardener carried a bundle of name tags and a brush pen. His heart weighed down like a basket filled with many unused things. He had been assigned to tend a newly built garden, with what seemed a simple requirement: attach nameplates for every plot, record planting dates, soil type, water amount, notes on sunlight and watering schedule. He made a long list, numbering, drawing grids, bullet points, and set small daily benchmarks, as if even a flower must run a race against someone invisible beyond the wall. Over a week, he slept poorly, his eyes always open in the middle of the night like a door not yet closed. In that darkness, lines of text appeared in his mind like over-pruned hedges. Water at exactly this hour. Measure soil so many times. Fertilize exact amount. Cut flawed leaves. The more he must, the stiffer he became inside. He took his bundle of blank tags into the garden. They stood like reminders born to demand their place. He knelt before a basil bed, uncapped his pen. The pen remained motionless in his hand like a bird unwilling to fly. He looked up. The monastery roof was a calm ink stroke against the deepening sky. On the rear veranda, the abbot sat with a cup of tea, bathed in soft golden lamplight that made everything look aged just enough to feel gentle. He inserted the first tag, wrote the name clearly, added precise notes, then moved to the next bed. A breeze stirred a tag. The scratch of wood was like worry repeated. The second, the third, row after row, his handwriting became sharper, the strokes cutting into some invisible covering over the plants. He did not notice that every word he wrote bound the plant with unseen cords, a way of tethering it to his knowing. When he reached a row of low chrysanthemums, a firefly landed on the pen tip, flickered once, then flew away. In that moment he felt a faint spark within him, not enough to light a path, but enough to whisper that darkness is not an enemy. He looked up. The abbot was there at the end of the path. Unobserved until now, the abbot walked over, surveyed the orderly tags like soldiers, finished his tea, and spoke in a soft voice. If the garden is made only of words, then who will grow? He stood still. The sentence fell without sound. Yet he heard it echo inside him, like skipping a stone into a deep well and waiting long for the echo to rise. The abbot neither reproved nor praised nor corrected. He simply walked along the beds, touching leaves indifferently, like touching a sleeping child's forehead to see if there is fever. At the end of a bed, he paused. There stood a young eggplant, its stem soft, leaning toward the nearby tag. The abbot reached, removed the tag, and replanted it a hand's breadth farther. He said the plant needs space to bear fruit. The young man watched, wide-eyed, as the word fault left the abbot's lips without blame. It smelled like earth after rain, clean, warm. The abbot walked on, pulled up a few tags, flipped others over, left gaps in places the young man had not yet labeled. He said a name is to help one remember the way, not to cage the plant into a label. Then he returned to the veranda, leaving the young man amid the garden and his tags. no longer demanding their gaze. He sat down, back to a fragment of bamboo fence, eyes on the scattered stars like salt across the face of the night sun. Since childhood he liked naming everything. He named clouds by stories he imagined. He named afternoons, dividing them into late afternoons and early afternoons. The ones waiting for rain, the ones waiting for someone. Growing up, he named goals, anchored them in time like driving stakes into earth, and walked according to those stakes, never stopping to look at the growth at the margins. Naming everything once made him feel he grasped the world. But tonight in the garden, he saw that grasp was too tight. It made his hand ache and made the life in his hand slip away. The breeze passed. One tag he had written with elegant script fluttered down face down. Like one who no longer wishes to argue, he picked it up, leaned it by the edge of the drainage furrow without replanting it. He walked along the rows, read the names he had written, and suddenly read behind each name a reminder loaded with anxiety. Water at 5 a.m. Shade at 3 p.m. Pinch tops day 11. He exhaled. His breath sounded like a door slightly ajar. That night he made no further progress. Didn't aim to finish the list. Didn't force himself to complete. He closed his pen, carried the bundle of tags into his room, placed them by the window. On the desk, the abbot had left a thin piece of wood and a barbed cord. No message. He understood the abbot invited him to hang another sign on the door of his heart. He carved 4 words on the wood with a small knife he found in a drawer. He did not rush the naming. He hung the sign on a hook by the window. The night wind made it tremble slightly, producing a faint sound like a distant bell. He lay in bed, listened to the night wind ride through bamboo, thought of the plant needs space to bear fruit, and suddenly saw every error in his life as small dots on a black canvas, each dot contributing to its own galaxy, needing no one's approval to hang there. He slept without knowing when. Only that upon waking, his body felt lighter as if someone had lifted a sack of sand from his chest. In the following days, he changed how he entered the garden. He went empty-handed, leaving pen and tags behind. He walked a circuit to listen to the garden speak, by scent, by sound, by the feel of a leaf under his hand. On a day when the soil smelled cool, he watered less. When leaves stood still in sunlight, he shaded for an hour. On gusty days, he placed stakes for weaker stems. His notes shifted from tags into the pages of his heart, where no pages could fall. He still recorded, still remembered, still adjusted, but not to prove control, but to learn to live together. The remaining tags he placed at bed edges, only labeling what a newcomer in the garden needs to avoid stepping on a seedling. The rest he left blank, as if reserving space for sky to pass through plants unhampered by words. Occasionally the abbot passed by, touched his shoulder silently. That touch was enough for him to know he was walking toward something. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind a row of eucalyptus, a child from the nearby village followed her mother into the monastery to ask for water. She stopped at the garden's edge before a bed of purple water spinach flowers. Eyes wide as if hearing a fairy tale told in leaves, she asked the gardener what that flower was named. He was about to answer, but instead he invited her to name it herself. The girl thought, tilted her head, smiled, and called them the fingers of water. The gardener laughed. That name was so beautiful that the word in his mind felt shy to intrude. He asked why she named it so. The girl replied, because they bloom with rain and their color is like the robe of the stream at dusk. Her mother apologized for her child's fanciful talk. He shook his head and said any name that brings coolness to the heart is a true name. The girl drank water and ran off, leaving behind a laughter cracked from the earth like a seed meeting rain. He realized the unnamed often live longest in others' hearts. Seasons change. Beds once planted cleared. Spinach vines climbed high. Eggplants bore their first fruit. Gourd vines began writing their own curves on trellises. The garden no longer overflows with tags. It is rich with shade. Evenings, He sits on the porch steps looking at the garden. Without rushing inside to check his notebook, he lets his eyes rest like a vintner lets the earth lie fallow after harvest. Sleep comes swiftly then, like a cat familiar to home. No need to call it. He asks the abbot if there is a secret to sleeping well. The abbot says, "Don't force sleep. Stay with the garden. Then sleep comes." He smiles, understanding some words need only to be carried, not explained. Night falls. The monastery bell tolls in a long chime. He listens to each tone of darkness, thickening then thinning. A stray old tag drifts to his feet. He picks it up. The wood faded, the ink blurred. He flips it. On the back, he had written long ago a small line: "Do not trap the firefly." He recalls summer at age 10, chasing fireflies with friends, locking them in jars to admire. The light in the jar is beautiful at first, then fades. By morning none survive. Growing up, he forgot that lesson, replaced fireflies with time and names, trying to trap everything in a jar called success, then wondering why the light extinguished. Tonight, he places the tag in the mouth of his basket, neither discarding nor keeping, just resting it there like an unsent letter. He steps into the garden, passes the basil, touches a leaf. In the pale night light, a dewdrop stands on the leaf's tip like a tiny eye. He bends, realizing he need not label that droplet anymore. It is itself, whole, cool, needing no confirmation. By season's end, the garden thrives, not because everything followed his plan, but because everything found its place within each other. Ants found paths, spiders stretched webs just enough. Birds came at the hour they are meant to pick over ripe eggplants he left behind. He writes a new sign to hang at the garden gate. He once planned to write its name in large letters. Now he writes 2 small lines. "Walk slowly, do not hurry to name." The wooden sign trembles in the breeze, making a sound like a smile. Visitors to the monastery often read it and then step more softly. He sits and watches, seeing each step as a promise kept. At night, he falls asleep when he lays down, without fighting questions. When questions come, he invites them for a stroll in the nameless garden. There they no longer want to argue. They walk slowly, gaze at flowers, sit by a water furrow, then quietly return to sleep. Perhaps because for the first time, that question is seen by a garden where it does not have to be the boss. One late autumn morning, the abbot comes to stand beside him, not facing the garden but toward the distant mountain range. The abbot asks, "What is the garden's name?" The young man was about to say it needs no name. Then he thinks, and replies softly, "The garden is breathing." The abbot nods, his eyes narrow like a stream flowing into a gorge. Then the abbot speaks sufficiently. The 2 words fall into him like first raindrops marking a great rain nearing, but he is no longer afraid of getting wet. He knows he has learned to shield with simplicity, and let the rest be cleansed by the rain. That night, before sleep, he opens the window, lets the wind into the room. He places his notebook beside the bed but does not open it. He rests a hand over his chest and closes his eyes. In the warm darkness expanding through the room, he sees the nameless garden spread within his chest. There, each thought is a small tree, allowed to bear fruit, to fall by wind, to regrow in light. There, each worry is an insect. It may hum, it may stay quiet, it may fly away if the windows open. There, each sleep is a rain arriving just right, enough to soften the earth, enough to soften the person, needing no urging. And while he strolls through that inner garden with half-closed eyes, he hears a phrase like wind stirring trellis vines. When the mind stops naming, things speak their own name by presence. The phrase needs no memory, it dissolves into the breath. He drifts into sleep as if roots reach water, no ending, no fanfare, only a slow and gentle movement. In the morning, the remaining tags still rest on his desk, ready for necessary places, and countless blank spaces remain, reserved for nights to write by scent and sound in their own way. The garden that needs no name still grows in its own manner. And the gardener sleeps in the way of one who knows how to stand with, not above. Story 4: The Waiting Room at the Night Station. The small station lies at the edge of town like a comma in a long sentence of fields. By day, it is noisy with train announcements over loudspeakers, the rails creaking against each wheel, hurried footsteps chasing the minute hand. But when night falls, the station becomes like a wide room whose door opens into darkness, where every sound lowers its voice as though afraid to wake something sleeping beneath the ground. The young station attendant is working the night shift, wearing a thin coat, a half-empty cup of tea beside him, always glancing at the schedule board on the wall as if in it lies the answer to all life's uncertainties. He believes in numbers and timetables. He records every delay, calls to confirm every train, walks the platform to check each lamp. He does his job so well that no one complains. Yet he is so weary that each night he hears the unending whisper of, what ifs? What if the train is late? If passengers complain? If a supervisor surprises him? If a bolt loosens and he does not notice? Those ifs swarm like tiny mosquitoes, cannot kill them, but they nibble sleep until it sifts into a torn net. That night the wind picks up. The damp smell of the river seeps through the wooden window cracks. He walks onto the platform, sees the yellow lamps cast long lines across the concrete. On the rails, cold metal tolls beat like an ancient stringed instrument tuning itself. He gazes into the distance, where darkness swallows the tracks like an untold story. In the waiting room, only an elderly woman holding a bamboo basket and a schoolboy with a guitar sit quietly, occasionally plucking a string then releasing it. The schedule board says the night train will arrive 15 minutes late. He notes it, calls to confirm, yet his heart is uneasy. He returns inside and sits at a wooden table, where an old wall clock and a thick ledger full of details rest. Everything is correct, except his chest. His breathing is shallow, his shoulders drawn up as if carrying a load no one asked him to carry. In the corner of the waiting room hangs a small wooden sign worn by time, though the silver letters have faded. You can still read, please sit. Just that, not kindly, not you are invited, not forbidden. A simple invitation like an empty chair. He stares at the sign, and suddenly his fatigue materializes, no longer vague mist, but a guest at the door, knocking twice, speaking in a gentle voice, "Let me in." He has chased that guest away many times, telling it there is still much to do, that he cannot weaken now, that responsibility is a brick wall, not to let mortar crumble. But tonight, he has no strength left to chase it. He nods softly, drags the chair beside him, and says, "Sit, I will sit with you." The strange thing, the moment he invites fatigue to sit, it stops hovering at the threshold, stops knocking. It sits quietly, sets its heavy backpack on the floor, breathes in his rhythm. The old woman coughs softly. He fetches her a flask of warm water. She smiles, with a dialect unfamiliar, says she is visiting her grandchild. It's okay if the train is late, so long as the night is not cold. The boy with the guitar lifts his head and asks if he may sit on the veranda and play softly. He nods. The guitar's notes are gentle, like moonlight slipping through the windows, not bright, but enough to sense the moon. The melody is simple and interrupted by wind, not striving for completeness, not seeking performance. The music makes the night's walls thinner, turns the clocks ticking from urging into lullaby. He leans back in his chair. For the first time in weeks, he does not fix his eyes on the schedule board. The timetable is still there. The letters have not fled, but they no longer climb onto his chest. They become lines of ink doing their duty, to remind, not rule. A thin old man enters, wearing a knit cap and holding a small oil lamp. He lives at the end of the tracks, in a house with a banana garden and a clothesline that always has a white shirt hanging. He used to service the rails, now retired, but each night he walks to the station, saying he goes to listen to the track, The attendant had never paid attention to that phrase. Listen to the track. What does the track speak? He wondered, for he hears only trains, wind, insects. The old man sets the lamp on the table, invites him to the platform. He places his hand on the rail, closes his eyes, and waits for a long while. Wind passes, lamp flickers, its flame steady. He asks the attendant what he senses. The attendant places his hand upon the rail. At first he feels only the cold of metal, but then, with patience, a very faint vibration emerges, like the pulse of earth itself. The old man says, "That is the breathing of the track." Every night the tracks breathe, but if one is busy and tight, one cannot hear. To listen to the track is to know that everything is still there, in its own order, without needing constant guarding. He keeps his hand there longer, his mind still, only feeling. That subtle vibration soothes another tremor within him. He understands in a way without words. It is not he who guards the track, but the track that anchors him to the right rhythm. The old man tucks away the lamp and nods. It is enough. Then leaves to the grass near lamp post number 3, sitting with his back against it as though leaning on an old friend. The attendant returns to his desk and sees the ledger open to a page titled, Worst Case Scenarios. He smiles, flips to a blank page, and sets his pen down without writing. The pen lies still, like a fish resting at the bottom of a lake, not because he abandons responsibility, but because he has found a new task. To sit with night the way one sits with a frightened child, without explanation or threats. Just holding its hand until it stops trembling. The station loudspeaker cracks momentarily, then returns to regular announcements. The night train is now delayed by another 5 minutes. He relays the update quietly. The old woman nods. The boy shifts his cord. Those 5 minutes no longer stretch like taffy stuck to a shoe. They drift across the platform like clouds passing in front of the moon. Out on the yard, a dog is curled in a ball, sometimes exhaling like a man who just set down a heavy load. In the far row of benches, a traveler lies face down on his backpack, breathing evenly, likely tired, likely calm. The wooden sign, "Please sit," still vibrates faintly in the breeze, like a gentle prompt. When the last train of the night finally arrives, the rails click in a long resonance. The headlamp pierces the darkness, splitting his tension as though tearing cloth from a nail. He carries out his duties, guiding passengers on, repeating safety reminders, smiling when someone asks their car number. It is still work, but something has shifted. Duty is no longer perched on top of him. It sits beside him. The train departs, leaving behind a void scented of iron, smoke, human presence. That space used to welcome worry's first breath. Tonight, it is where he sits down to breathe. The old man is gone. The grandmother and the boy have left too. The platform is empty, like the first page of a story just begun. He pours more hot water into the pot, listening to the water drop against the metal, a greeting. He thinks of worst case scenario and smiles, knowing that most fears never come, and if they do, he will pass through them by placing his hand on the rail and listening. Night transitions into its thinnest hour. This is when darkness no longer threatens, nor roars. It lies down like a full beast, breathing softly. He turns off half the lights in the waiting room. The walls lose their yellow glow. The tiled floor stops glaring. Everything steps back a pace so he and Night sit closer together. He takes from the drawer an old notice card, flips it, writes 4 words in pencil. Listen, invite, sit, breathe. He tapes it beside the wooden sign. It is not a rule, nor a slogan. It is a reminder to himself in future nights. Listen to the track. Invite your fatigue in. Sit with it. Breathe with it. He understands now that overthinking need not be driven away. It needs a chair. Toward dawn the mist grows thick. The station lights become fluffy like little cotton blooms. A morning train will arrive in an hour. He drapes a thin blanket over his shoulders and leans back in his chair. No striving to sleep. No struggling with thoughts. When a what if steps in, he merely gestures to the benches. Your seat is over there. The ifs sit, yawn, lean against one another, drowsy. Somewhere beneath, the track continues its faint breathing. He places his hand over his chest and senses a second rhythm answering his own. The two rhythms meet in a pause between breaths, like two trains arriving on parallel tracks at the same time. Uncollided, just quietly acknowledging that both exist. When the first light of day filters through the roof tiles, he rises and opens the window. The fresh air touches his forehead like a nameless hand. He brews a new pot of tea, pours one cup and places the other on the chair opposite, the place for fatigue. The steaming tea is untouched, but its aroma spreads like a silent thank you. He looks at the schedule board, still rows of trim hours and minutes. He smiles, seeing them suddenly as handwritten lines from an old friend, perhaps flawed, perhaps delayed sometimes, but no less a friend for that. He opens his ledger. On the blank page of last night, his small 4 words now appear like a new marker on his internal map. He knows there will be difficult nights ahead, noisy announcements, tardy trains, impatient travelers, but he also knows he has a waiting room inside himself in which to sit. A wooden sign always ready reading, "Please sit." A track that breathes, an old man who visits by memory, a boy who returns in melody, a grandmother who reminds that a night is never cold when someone sits beside you. He turns off the extra light and allows dawn's glow to enter. In that thin moment between night and day, he perceives silence full and round as a dewdrop falling onto concrete. In the place where we cease guarding by fear, everything guards itself by its own rhythm. He smiles softly, not because he solved the equation, but because from now on, when overthinking comes to shift the night shift, he will not chase it away. He gives it a ticket with no destination, asks it to sit in the waiting room, and together they listen to the track breathe until the train of sleep arrives slowly. Its door opening gently, no rush, no clamor, only one person boarding, the door closing, and it is gone. Story 5: The Suspension Bridge Inside the Chest. Night in the mountains often arrives like a friend who never knocks, gentle, slow, and certain. The smell of young pines drapes down the slopes like a thin blanket. The whisper of the stream slips among the smooth round stones like someone inviting you to sit quietly. Among the small ranger camp, there is a suspension bridge strung between 2 ridges, its cables silvered by rain and sun. When the wind blows, the wooden planks shiver in a rhythm all their own, a rhythm that never consents to a wall clock. The young woman assigned to this post this season is someone who likes answers. In her backpack she carries a notebook, a highlighter pen, printed maps, offline maps, spare batteries, and a numbered list of what ifs. What if it rains suddenly? What if signal is lost? What if battery dies? What if wildlife appears? What if she must turn back? She writes to reassure herself. Yet the rows of writing grow like wild grass covering the path. On her first night, she lies in the tent, hears the bridge quiver in the dark, mistakes it for footsteps, leaps up to check. The flashlight slices mist like a thin blade across night's silk. There is nothing but shifting moisture and wind traveling across ridges. She returns to bed, pulls the blanket, but her heart still pulses to the imagined footsteps of someone invisible. Morning. The old station keeper brews tea, pours it for her, saying the night wind wanders. Don't call it a stranger. She smiles, but her hand still grips the notebook. Her eyes still search for the next what if. At dusk, they set out to patrol the trail and must cross the suspension bridge. She stands at its head, looking down into misty chasms. The terraced fields below glint like ceramic dishes recently washed. Still holding water, the old man walks ahead, slowly, letting the cables hum their song. He says, "Walk by the sound of the cables, not by your head." She thinks it a joke, but steps on. She discovers her body is like a drum. If she resists, the bridge quakes more. If she moves with it, it becomes gentle as a cat. Midway, wind bursts. Her grip tightens white-knuckled. Her mind flashes through all the warnings: broken cable, sliding plank, plunge where no one knows, a stampede of what-ifs. He stands a few planks ahead, doesn't turn back, just says softly, "If you fear, fear right here. Don't fear tomorrow." His words land. The what-ifs in her mind retreat into the forest. Their footsteps fading. She breathes in, then out, matching the bridge's rhythm to her own. She takes another step, then another, reaching the other side as if she crossed an instrument that knows her innermost self. That night, she lies listening to the bridge's echo. She does not leap up this time. She begins to count, but stops mid-count, for the bridge's vibration becomes the breath of some great animal sleeping in the forest, gentle, deep. In the days ahead, her assignment is to measure soil moisture in the eastern regrowth forest. The maps show trails, but the forest always has its own shortcuts. At midday, they pause in a high meadow. The old man pulls from his coat a cracked pocket watch, its glass fractured. Its hands stopped. He says, "This watch broke since last rainy season, but still has use." She frowns. "A stopped watch? How is it useful?" He smiles, places it in her palm. "When you worry, place it on your chest. Listen to the still hands. Then listen to your heart. Which sound reminds you to live?" She tries. Her palm touches cold glass. Beneath are two fine hands immobile like dew-stuck leaves. Under her shirt, she feels thump, thump, rhythmic, faint, seemingly meaningless, but just enough to free some invisible gear in her mind from jamming. That evening, they return to camp late, clouds thick as wool. The bridge trembles more than usual. Each plank underfoot echoes a question. She crosses amidst a line of what-ifs. At the bridge's apex, she halts, places the pocket watch on her chest, no ticking, only her own heartbeat. The bridge still sways, but the questions lose their sharp edges. They become raindrops slipping past a window. She realizes she is not defeating fear, but sitting beside it, placing a hand on its back the way one soothes a trembling pup during a storm, waiting until it stills. In the tent is a small wooden table, with a tattered map pinned above, zones of old burn scars, new plantings, and nests to inspect. That night, she opens her notebook, planning tomorrow's work, then shakes her head, lays down the pen. She recalls, walk by cable sound, not by head. Rewrites not bullet commands but a few lines like to a companion. Tomorrow we'll visit the stream's edge. Check the water's scent. Step into the meadow. Read its footprints. Her writing flows soft, arcing, opening the flap. Night wind brushes in, lifting the curtain like a fish rising from water without needing to show its body. She tucks into bed before she can file all her what-ifs. In the morning, the box rests unopened. No one demanded it open. One evening, a heavy rainstorm is forecast from upstream. The old man says they must inspect the bridge's anchor piers, just in case. They tread through pattering rain, ponchos rustling like old newspaper. The flashlight scans bolts, beams, dark steel cables. He shows how to observe not just metal, but earth. Whether ground cracks, grasses lean oddly, water swirls at base. The bridge holds not only by cable, but by what you cannot see. He says softly, as though telling a fairy tale. Rain intensifies. The bridge creaks low, a growl rising from tree roots. She stands close and smells wet iron, soaked wood, moss old and deep. The what-ifs clamor. She places her hand on the wet cable, colder, letting their words melt into her skin and wash away in the rain. He nods. Good. Let rain speak first. Then we respond. They tighten anchors, wedge rocks, then sit beneath the shelter, watching rain like smoke curtains. The bridge vanishes behind the downpour, but its hum continues, a hum not measured in seconds. It is sustaining itself. He says. She thinks. Yes, sometimes the mind sustains itself. If we do not tug on its cable, That stormy night, power fails. In the tent only the flashlight glows dim. A pool in her palm. She places the pocket watch on her chest and listens. Rain drums thousands of tiny drums on the tin roof. In her mind it urges scenarios, schematics, evacuation plans, but in the forest, where does one send reports? She laughs at herself, then whispers. If rain says, go to sleep, that if is different now, not sharp, but round like a droplet. She drapes a hand over her brow, imagines the bridge as a hammock in night, swaying gently. She places all her what-ifs on it, watches them sway, tremble, and find they are not so heavy. In that moment of imagining, she falls asleep untrumpeted. In her dream she steps across another bridge, low, over a clear stream with green stones. Beyond, someone sits waiting, not calling. She approaches and sees it is herself. Older, hair sprouting silver, gentle eyes. That figure teaches nothing, merely offers a small box. She opens it. Inside is a thin thread like a hair. Inscribed, do not tighten. She wakes at dawn, the dream's warmth lingering. When season's end nears, a district survey team arrives with meters, rulers, charts. They cross the bridge. She lags behind, the pocket watch in hand. Mid-span, she pauses a moment, relaxes her knees, lets the cables hum. Far below, the terraced fields shine like the back of a giant fish. In her mind someone almost says, hurry, but it sounds like an old neighbor who moved away. She smiles, steps on. She senses a new eyelid, one built to see the beauty of fear. It has lashes. Rhythm, warmth, not smoke. At day's end, the team departs. The old man sits on the timber porch and tells her, you have the bridge of the forest. Now build the bridge of your chest. She asks how. He answers, span between thought and breath. Anchor one end in breathing, the other in thinking. Make it as long as you like, so long as its cable is honesty. She looks between the two words and sees a delicate bridge sprouting like bamboo shoot. Storm reports cease. The bridge survives. Forest greens deepen. She retires the old notebook, opens a new one. On its first page, instead of tomorrow's tasks, she draws two parallel lines, links them with crossing diagonals like a child drawing a bridge, then writes beneath, when it quivers, stand, when afraid, sit, when thinking too much, build a bridge. Below that, she tapes the faint thread from her dream, or the thread she once cut for a plant marker. Now she discerns no difference. On her final evening before rotating out, she walks the bridge alone. Sky is clear, wind mild. Midway, she closes her eyes. No counting, no plan. Let the cables lead her steps. She places the still pocket watch on her chest, though broken. It is a retired teacher, still silent but wise. She recalls her city nights, incandescent rooms, glowing phones, fingers scrolling, mind chewing over meaningless phrases. If she returns there, she will hang a small sign above her bed, walk by cable sound. In that moment, she sees each what if turn into a little maple leaf, drifting down a stream, red, beautiful. She leaves the station in a silver dawn, shakes the old man's hand, and receives a small paper packet. He has wrapped the pocket watch in it. Carry it with you, but don't open it, he says. When you can't hear yourself, place it on your chest. Let its silence call your rest. Descending the mountain, the road hums under the vehicle. Clouds hug the curves. In the car, others talk. She rests her head against the window, watches the world pass. Inside her chest, a new bridge has been built. Its cables dull, its scent fresh. That night back in her lodging, she hears late traffic hum like city insects. She turns off the light early. Instead of reaching for her phone, she opens the window, lets the thin wind in, places the watch on her chest. Overthinking knocks politely. She points to the empty chair by the bed and says as old man taught, and as she now teaches herself, sit there. The bridge has space. The questions are not banished, so they do not yell. They sit quietly, Listening to cables hum, she breathes. The bridge demands no destination, it demands only truth. And, slowly, sleep traverses that bridge. It carries no suitcase, asks no ticket, but steps over. On the far side is a wide meadow, where a young person lays down all the ifs like smooth stones in a circle, sits at its center, and listens to a night without pressure, without demands, without needing answers, only needing a breath long enough for a heart to know it is at home. Story 6: The 24-hour laundry and the lost garments. In the city at night, some shops never sleep, like gentle eyes watching over those too weary to guard themselves. At a corner where sodium lamps spill golden butter light, there is an old 24-hour laundromat. Its glass door is scratched. The cold, slick handle has been turned by countless hands through many rainy seasons. Inside, the scent of detergent mingles with the warm metal smell of drums, the clink of coins dropping into slots, and the hum of water like a storyteller who cannot stop breathing. The night attendant is a man around 50, salt and pepper hair lit by the yellow light. He tucks a pencil behind his ear and carries a small notebook, not for debts, but for forgotten garment bags. He calls it his reclaim book. Each page is a date, under it, a list of items rescued from spinning drums, an old train ticket, a lost shirt button, a folded scrap of paper with 2 lines of unrhymed verse, a handful of seaside sand left in a travel bag, a tattered fabric talisman, a dented coin with a hole, a reversed ID photo without a name. He carefully places each into a small plastic bag, arranges them in a glass case beside the counter, and posts a simple note: "If this is yours, feel free to take it." There is no background music in this laundromat. There is only the machine cycle. Soak, wash, rinse, spin, dry. Like a heart that knows how to place worries on a conveyor belt, then return them as the warm smell of clean cloth. One night, when the city had quieted until only distant trucks sighed, a young woman entered carrying a bag larger than necessary. Her eyes looked as though she had passed through rain and found no shelter. A few strands of hair clung damp, and a faint scent of perfume lingered on her collar, like an unfinished promise. She strode straight to machine number 7, the oldest one. Few choose it because it often vibrates violently during the final spin, like a heart anxious to not obey instructions. She opened her bag. Inside were not just clothes, but items not meant for washing. A stack of crumpled notes, several old photographs, a handkerchief embroidered with someone's initial, a thin black notebook. The attendant watched silently, then handed her an empty plastic basket, as though offering an extra chair in someone's waiting room. She hesitated, held the stack of paper, flipped through a few, the ink dense like roads not yet mapped. "I want to wash it all," she whispered, voice timid as though afraid to awaken something sleeping inside the machine. He nodded and pointed to machine 7, saying, "This machine can handle what is hard to soften." She pours warm water, sprinkles detergent slowly, like salting a fresh wound, arranges clothes in the drum, then places the papers atop. Her heart races as if placing a secret into the ocean's mouth. The lid snaps shut with a crisp click. She presses start. The indicator light pulses. Water floods in. The very first sound is like someone exhaling after holding their breath too long. The attendant brings her a cup of tea, in a lidded paper cup. Steam coils like handwriting. "Sit," he says, pointing to the row of plastic chairs by the glass wall. She sits, arms clasping the cup, peering at the tumbling drum. Swatches of clothspin, sheets of paper rigid at first, then soaked. The ink smears, swelling into blotches like rain streaks. Startled, she stands to stop the machine, afraid of losing something in the wash. The man gently rests his finger on the pause button, not pressing it, as one might press a parent's forehead. "If something must be kept, we'll salvage it in rinse. If something must go, let water handle it." She sits again, eyes no longer glued to the porthole. under the stark white light. The day's events sift through her mind like laundry separated by color. The meeting that dragged on like taffy. Unread messages, missed calls, a phrase that tightened her chest, an email that felt like someone stuffing pebbles in her coat. She had stuffed more and more into her inner pockets until even bending to tie her shoes felt heavy. Now the water laps at the drum walls like an old friend telling stories of stains, reminding that every blemish has its own voice, if we listen with the right frequency. The attendant opens the reclaim book, carefully writes, "Today, 3:07 a.m. A bundle of handwritten notes rinsed. Owner remains seated." She laughs, the first in the night, not for attention, but so her throat knows the air has a way through. The machine shifts to wash. The drum revolves steadily. For the first time, she sees the spin not as threat, not a cycle of duties, names, or comparisons, but as water and soap embracing chores they know, needing no direction from her. At machine 3, a thin young man deposits 2 work shirts and a pair of socks with worn heels, and places a battered coin with a hole onto the counter. The attendant returns it with a soft remark, "This isn't money, it's a road charm." The young man thanks him and tucks it into his pocket. He records in the book, 3:19 a.m., 1 round hole remembered. An older lady enters carrying a bag of handkerchiefs, all white, each likely a story of wiping away. She does not wash them, only stands watching the drum, as if gazing at a childhood stream. "I come to listen to the water," she says. The man nods, as though listening is part of his profession. The young woman returns to machine 7 just as it enters rinse. The attendant signals, "Now is when you listen." She watches the papers inside the clear drum. Most text dissolves. Only a few stubborn remnants cling. She thinks of phrases she has held too long. "It must be this way. Absolutely that way. If not, then," she sees them bleed pale as weak ink, no longer heavy enough to burden her vision. Rinse is the cycle where water does the forgiving. Whispers apologies she never voiced to herself for having scrubbed too hard. Rinse is the cycle where overthinking drops the red pen. Rinse is the cycle where the torn sheets accept a late bath and agree to become pulp. A chance to become something new, silence. During the spin, the laundromat vibrates like a boat. The final tremor, the one that makes people anxious, tonight feels like a delicate laugh. She places her hand on the drum's wall and senses the centrifugal force not pushing her away, but shedding weight from the clothes. She thinks of tomorrow, of tasks unavoidable. Suddenly she sees them like damp garments entering the spin cycle, still themselves, but lighter. The attendant knows the machine's rhythm too intimately. He can nearly close his eyes and sense transitions. He recounts, without waiting. Some bring their wedding dress saying they want to wash memory again. The burden of remembering is too much to sleep. She asks, "What is the correct temperature?" He points to the dryers along the back wall. Above them is a small hand-written sign his own pencil wrote, "Low heat for delicate, medium for everyday, air dry for things that must converse with the sky." She reads and senses an unspoken philosophy. She selects low heat, places clothes inside, and tucks the old photographs gently between 2 sheets of tissue. She refuses to reduce the stack of papers to pulp. She retrieves the remnants and arranges them in a small tray, seeing them as a cloud unraveling after its rain. "I thought keeping things whole was loyalty," she says. He pours more tea and flips to an old page in the reclaim book, indicating a single line. Loyalty to what passed, or loyalty to what breathes? The question lies there. It does not demand an answer now. The dryer exhales warmth like the breath of home. The spinning drum now hums softly, turning her clothes into embers of gentle light. She leans her back against the wall, closes her eyes, lets warmth pass through her shoulders, that place she had held tight from carrying too many ifs. Outside the glass, night is receding like silk being rolled away. The older lady has left, carrying her pristine handkerchiefs. The skinny youth is dozing on a chair, The coin charm slips from his pocket, rolls to the woman's feet. She bends and places it back in his palm. The man closes his book, pencil behind his ear, watches machine 7 as one watches a child leaving class. The beep signals completion, soft, as though someone tapping on a kitchen door calling one to dinner. She opens the dryer, warmth floods out. She breathes in as greeting to a new day by the scent of clean cloth. Her clothes now feel light, not because weight vanished, but because burden redistributed, less held in fabric, less carried in mind. She folds slowly, not from melancholy, but from reverence. The fragile paper pulp she places into a small pouch, to bring home and remix into handmade paper. She voices the intention. He nods, lending her a small wooden frame for drying. Old paper or old text both may become blank lands. He says. She thanks him, steps toward the glass cabinet of lost items, watches the unclaimed things sparkling like stray stars. She sees none of her own possessions, but she senses she is retrieving something invisible. The right to forget without reproach. Turning, she touches the cool door handle, glances back. He is softly polishing the drum wall of machine 7, like stroking a child's hair before sleep. She asks his name. He smiles. Just call me the keeper of cycles. She laughs, walks out into the early wind. The red traffic light turns green, shifting places without haste. Back in her room, she does not open her phone or check messages. She retrieves the wooden frame, pours water, sprinkles the pulp bits, stirs with a fingertip. The water clouds, then settles, the surface flat like a still pond. She tilts the frame, water drains, leaving a thin film. She places it on the windowsill to air, letting wind speak to it. On her bed, she places a blank white sheet, pure white, on her pillow. A silent vow without words. She switches off the lamp, listens to the room breathe, hears her heartbeat matching the hum of some dryer in a neighboring block. Hears the city shifts. Overthinking knocks softly, like a late guest. She opens, gestures to the chair before her window. Sit, watch the clothes dry, don't stand at the headboard. The questions sit down, lower their voices. They watch the last droplets fall from the paper pulp. They realize they can cease falling. She draws the blanket to her chest, her hand resting loosely on her belly, a gesture not taught by books, but learned in a laundromat night, just before sleep takes her. She thinks a simple phrase, one like detergent dissolving in water. Tomorrow, we may wash again. For now, let water do water's part. Let sleep do sleep's part. And then she drifts away. No drumroll, no summons, but a long breath. And all that had labored in the day slips quietly into its rest. In the same way the man with salt gray hair inscribed in his little notebook. 3:58 a.m. A heart chose the start button for sleep. Story 7: The All-Night Library and the Book with No Words. The all-night library stands at the end of a street where the golden lamps always seem shy. Like a guest arriving late, its facade is modest. The blue wooden door is faded, telling of many retellings, its handle cold yet smooth from thousands of hands seeking their way. Inside, there is the scent of paper mingled with old wood, and a whisper of chalk dust from handwritten catalogs. The sound of shoes on floorboards small as raindrops on a roof. The pendulum clock breathing evenly beneath a vault of silence. The night librarian is a woman whose hair is pinned with a silver leaf clip. She moves slowly, aware that every step is a footnote line. She wears no name badge, only a red thread around her left wrist. The only sign she remembers every book's comings and goings. Some who cannot sleep come here. Students clutching incomplete theses. Night shift workers wanting the rustle of turning pages so their hearts hear something besides machines. An old teacher searching for a lost poem from long ago. A girl carrying a pen box and questions that slipped out of her mind when the lights went out. They arrive like little boats mooring to a wooden post called order. But here order has no funeral scent. It is the breathing of catalog entries. The way letters agree to line themselves so a living mind does not get jostled in the night. The girl arrives in the thinnest hour, when darkness no longer threatens but lies still. Like a cat, her wrists still smell of soap. A strand of hair sticks at her nape from repeated brushing. Her eyes carry faint circles like pencil smudges. She says softly, "I cannot sleep. My head is noisy. I want to borrow a volume. Any book that helps me stop counting." The librarian nods, but instead of taking her to psychology, Zen, or sleep hygiene sections, she leads her to a lesser-known corner, shelves with no cataloging, denoted only by a small pencil sign, "Gentle Vault," for those who need not understand immediately. The name makes the girl smile, childlike, as if catching a quiet secret. The librarian presents a cloth-bound gray volume with no printed title. Many return this early thinking it's a misprint. The librarian says, "But in truth, it is full." The girl opens it, confused. The pages are blank. No characters, no punctuation, only faint ruled lines, as delicate as the trace of a butterfly's wings. "Try sitting with it," the librarian says. "Don't try to write, don't try to read. Just let it rest your hand over your head." The suggestion feels like a silent ritual. She carries the blank book to table 7. Under a fabric shade lamp which glows warm as a teacup, she lays the blank volume before her, listening. The room's breathing, the gliding steps of someone passing a shelf, the scratch of pencil sharpening by the old teacher across the room. In her mind, the musts and what-ifs squabble like passengers late for a train. But the blank book sits there like a side dock, inviting their haste inside. With no words, there is no argument. With no subject, no pipeline to panic, only a smooth surface like a misted pond, where all things reflect without shouting. The librarian pours her a warm drink. "Here," she says, "we have a quiet rule. Every worry is issued a temporary library card, which expires at dawn." The girl laughs. A library card for worry. That idea causes the letters of overthinking in her mind to loosen. Unfold like wet paper. The librarian fetches 4 small rubber stamps, with faded violet ink. "See, name, let sit, promise Dawn." The girl requests to stamp them invisibly on the blank page. The violet ink seeps slightly into the cloth, forming a halo like a bruise, but not painful. She silently names each worry. Midweek deadline. Being misunderstood at dinner. A pinging name in my head. The phrase I wish I had said. Money? Each name becomes a guest. Once banging at her door. Now with a library card. Entering slowly. Sitting apart. Needing no jockeying for seats. This book is a room. She thinks. And I am the host who need not cook. Only light a lamp. At a nearby table, the old teacher pores over his lost poem. He once taught literature in high school, now retired. He comes at night to listen for letters counting themselves, a phrase that intrigues her. He explains that all his life he counted letters, graded them, praised beautiful ones, faulted clumsy ones. Now in old age he wants letters to count him. 1. I still breathe. 2. I cool a little. 3. I regret less. 4. I remember old names without ache. She smiles, thanks him for that monologue, then returns her gaze to the blank book. Impulsively she draws. Yes, draws. She pulls a pencil. The librarian does not stop her. You may draw or write or cross out. The only thing you need not do is perform. She says. The girl sketches a little window in a corner of the page. Just 4 lines. She imagines opening it. Wind enters. Strange as it seems, the what-ifs in her mind contract as if drawn by curtains to one side. Making room again, she lowers the pencil. Emptiness no longer terrifies her as before. Emptiness is a free seat, not a vacant house. She exhales. In the distance, the pendulum clock strikes 4, not urging, just marking that the night has crossed another chapter. She asks the librarian to show her the no need to understand immediately nook upstairs. The librarian leads her via a narrow wooden staircase, Each tread creaks as though a voice of a long-ago friend. The attic ceiling is low. The exposed beams bear hammer marks and cobwebs like the building's memories. There rest 12 chairs spaced about. On each lies a nameless object, a smooth stone, a bit of thorny vine, a shard of pottery, a feather, a chalk stub, a button, a blowpipe dried beyond use, an envelope without its address, a torn map piece, a useless key, a shirt button, a scented wood sliver. Those weary of letters, the librarian says, sit with an object. Objects do not argue. The girl chooses the stone, cool in her palm as a hand that knows how to be still. She sits, stone in her left hand, blank book in her right. In her mind, a rainstorm begins to fade. She speaks to the stone as one would a friend who offers no rebuttal. I am tired because I want everything clear immediately. I fear forgetting a small thing. Letting the big thing collapse. I have built an internal library with too strict a librarian who calls roll each night. The stone replies not in words, but in stillness. Its stillness carries weight and meaning, and somehow transmits to her the hardest skill of this age, the skill to not respond immediately. They descend to the ground floor. She asks to borrow the blank book. The librarian nods, writing in the log. Borrow 1. No words. 3:07 a.m. Return when sleep is done. Return when sleep is done. Those words make her laugh. The laugh rolling through stacks like a marble. He gives her a small bookmark strip with 4 empty squares. When insomnia visits, try these 4 small steps. Press your ear into silence. 1. Provide a chair for the thought. 2. Open your internal window. 3. Place a stone over your question. 4. You need not do all, just 1. She tucks away the strip. Before leaving, she pauses at the lost and found box, a wooden box with many compartments holding abandoned items, pens, transit cards, mismatched gloves, an old note. Don't forget to buy salt. She does not look for hers. Instead, she retrieves a blank small paper the librarian left. If this is your worry, leave it here. At dawn we return them by wind. She writes 1 line. To fear becoming the best version of myself at the cost of forgetting the version that breathes. She drops it into a compartment. At least tonight one worry has a home. On her way home she does not turn on music. She listens to her shoes tapping pavement, the sweep of early morning street cleaners, the distant hum of a starting vehicle. She cradles the blank book like a thin pillow. At home, she places it on her nightstand and sets the stone atop the window sketch. She doesn't try to will sleep. She simply opens a different window, the real window, letting a slim breeze drift over her brow. Across eyes, throat, chest, she lies on her side, knees slightly curled, left hand resting on her belly. The worries knock, but she offers them their temporary card, gestures to a chair. They sit. One large must blurts out. She stamps it, promise dawn. It reads, nods, lowers its volume. The blank volume lies open at no rush. The pendulum clock chimes 4:30. Between the 4th strike and the half, there is a sliver of space, thin as a hair, where breath changes shift. She steps through it as one passes through a familiar door. No bow, no asking. Sleep, which has always awaited near the threshold, step in. Takes her hand, leads her in. No word is spoken, for every word had been written already, in white. In the morning, dawn's light floods her room like a fresh page. She wakes without startle. On the table, the stone lies still, warm. The bookmarked squares remain. The first square is softly smudged, as though filled by her breath. She makes herself a cup of tea, places her hand on her chest, listening to its answers instead of reciting discipline. Before leaving for work, she slips the blank book into her bag, not to return early, but to carry no words as a key opening doors that have no locks. At midday, in a meeting, when phrases begin to pile into walls, she pulls out the 4-square strip. She glances at square 2, provide a chair for thought. She mentally draws a chair inside. Invites, if I fail, to sit. The question sits, less frantically. In the afternoon, when a text pings and her chest leaps, she opens Square 3, open internal window. Breeze passes through. In the evening, before returning to the library, she mails herself a postcard. Finished a chapter of no words. Title: Breathe. Night returns. She comes back. The librarian meets her with a quiet smile, not asking whether she found meaning, just knowing her journey with the blank book is done. For now, she returns it with a bow. The librarian stamps the loan slip. Slept. A stamp carved as a falling leaf on water. She exits, stops at the lost and found box. The note she left is there. To fear becoming my best version while forgetting the version that breathes. Beside it sits a small pebble, and someone has added, the version that breathes is enough to be held. She does not need to know who wrote it. She steps into the deepening dusk. Sky darkens to milky shade. Birds draw slanted lines in twilight. She smiles to herself and murmurs, the gentle vault, for those who need not understand immediately. It turns out to not understanding immediately is understanding at the right moment. And in her walk home, she knows that if overthinking comes late tonight, she will bring it back to the library. Check it out, a temporary card. Stamp promise dawn. Let it sit with a silent book until it, too, tires and sleeps. Story 8: The pot of broth at the late-night noodle shop. When a city passes midnight, there is a silence that can only be felt by skin, like a thin veil draped over the shoulders of the late walker. And within that silence, down a narrow alley, there is a noodle shop that still keeps its door open. Soft yellow lights cling to the wooden walls like honey soaking into wood grain. The kitchen sits right by the counter, its flame low and even, never blazing. Before me is a large broth pot, always kept at a gentle simmer, like the slow breath of something living. The cook is a middle-aged woman, hair neatly tied, her eyes calm from many nights of both storms and sleeplessness. She does not greet with courtesy lines, only nods, ladles a bowl of clear broth, slides it toward me and says, just breathe in the steam first. We'll talk about eating later. I lift the bowl near my face. The aroma of cinnamon, star anise, ginger, and simmered bones mingle, subtle, deep, as if a story told without force. My gaze lingers on the big pot. The surface is smooth. Occasionally a faint foam rises, then sinks immediately, like a thought realizing it does not need to linger. She says, if you want the broth clear, do not force it to a boil. A moderate flame lets heavy elements settle. With fewer scums, the cook has less skimming to do. The broth will clarify itself. Those words entered my mind simply, but they unlocked a door. I suddenly remembered nights I had stoked too large a fire in my mind, stirring up every detail, demanding an answer right now. So anxiety's foam overflowed and I kept skimming, until everything turned cloudy. She lifts another pot, turns the heat high. Foam rises quickly. She uses the ladle to draw a line across the surface, then lowers the flame. She rests the ladle horizontally across the pot rim, as if placing a delicate bridge so steam may pass without turbulence. Without further explanation, I understood why I had felt weary so long. Beside the kitchen is an old round clock with a second hand that moves slowly, sometimes as if hesitating. I asked why she does not replace its battery. She smiled. In a kitchen, there should be something slow, to remind us that dishes have their own timing. Broth doesn't like being pressured. Fresh noodles dislike being forgotten. Green vegetables resent being over-worried. The diner only needs to sit in the right place. I look at a low wood table in the corner. On it lies a thick sheet of paper and an ink pen. Above hangs a small chalkboard. 3 short phrases. See, name, let be. I read them and feel my throat ease. Those 3 words were exactly what I had failed to do all this time. I often evade my emotions, refusing to name them, or I tear them apart as though stirring a pot with bare hands, and in the end, Both broth and self get burned. She asked what I would like. I requested a simple bowl. Just broth, scallion, and a piece of slow-cooked egg. She nodded, placed the noodles in a colander, did not stir vigorously, only lifted and lowered them in a steady rhythm, as though teaching me a lesson in gentle breathing, then ladled broth over them. She set the bowl before me. Steam rose like mist. I did not rush to eat. I spoke, a little to her, about my day, endless meetings. A message that squeezed my chest. The ifs, linking themselves like a train that doesn't stop. She interrupted not. She poured me a cup of warm water, placed it beside the bowl, and said, "Whenever thoughts begin to run, turn your eyes to the water in the cup instead of running after them." I obeyed. A sip traveled from lips, down throat, then rested in the belly, warming a place I had long ignored. The questions in my mind did not disappear, but they no longer rose to shout. They sat like guests invited to a chair. There is a glass jar on the table in front, holding thin-tied scraps of paper. She told me, "If you can't say things aloud, write one short sentence and drop it in. By dawn I'll place the jar outside and let the wind read them." I opened a few at random. I found heartbreakingly simple lines. "I fear waking in morning. I fear having to be strong. I fear trouble. I fear unworthy." I closed the jar, suddenly feeling lighter, because my fears were not alien things, but salts in the mix, like many grains we all carry. When they spill, they sting. With enough water, they dissolve. I asked for paper. I wrote, "I want to slow down a little." I tied it, dropped it in the jar. Returning to my noodles, I took the first bite. The broth, not bold, not showy, stayed long, like a hand laid on a shoulder at the right moment. I ate it all, not from hunger, but because I felt peace. Then I just sat watching the flame underneath the large pot, its blue flicker neither loud nor frightened. She slid a chair across and sat opposite. She told me, she used to cook at a big restaurant, everything rushed. Flamboyant, always watching the clock, flame always high. One night she passed this alley, saw a small aluminum pot in a dark window, lid slightly open, steam rising like a thin web, and she heard her own breathing. The next morning she resigned, collected some savings, opened this modest shop, relearned from scratch, learning to stand quietly before a pot, learning to watch foam rise and lower the flame, learning to dim lights so aromas may speak. I asked, "Do you have a method for someone who overthinks too much?" She laughed and said there is no special secret, only a few tools to have when your head is crowded. A cup of warm water, a bowl of light soup, a simple repetitive task, like washing a bowl slowly or folding a towel neatly, and a place to set your words down, like that jar, or a blank paper margin, or even the palm of your hand stroked in a steady rhythm. Then let the flame stay at the flame's level. Let water do water's part. I paid. She returned some coins plus a small brown slip of paper with 4 neat lines of advice. Do not overfire. If foam appears, draw one line and let rest. If weary, stop stirring. When eating, just sit. I kept that slip like a night train ticket. I stood, thanked, stepped into the night. The wind was just cool, the sky like a tin sheet. I walked slower than before, paused before a darkened window, saw my shoulders relax, my face no longer taut. The ifs remained, but they retreated back like bowls already drained and turned upside on the shelf. Droplets still fall, but quietly. At home, I boil a small pot of water, not roaring. I pour a cup, place it by the bedside. I pen short words on a paper and stick it to the cabinet. I turn off the light, lie on my side, hand on belly, feeling breath shift from strong boil to ripple. A question knocks. I open softly, invite it to sit. I tell it, I am cooking the night. Tomorrow I will sort. No dramatic magic, only choosing to lower the flame in my mind so that heaviness sinks. Lightness floats. The surface of my mind grows smooth like the broth after a good skim. And between two breaths, I hear the phrase I've waited from myself. Sleep now. Dawn will sort. Story 9: The Late Night Shoe Shop and the Map Under the Soul. As the city prepares for dawn, there is a sliver of time so thin that if you do not watch, you will cross it without noticing. It is when the streetlights have grown weary, but the sun has not yet stirred. Along a quiet lane flanking an old park, there is a shoe repair shop that never fully closes, its wooden door always ajar like a blinking eyelid. Inside, the air smells of beeswax, tanned leather, dried glue, and a scent hard to name, like time settling down to breathe. The shoemaker is old, his hands are sun-worn, his nails stained brown with polish, his brow lined with wrinkles like the seams of a beloved pair of shoes worn through many rainy seasons. I came one night, my mind still running like an overworked machine, carrying a pair of shoes whose heels were worn, and a bag heavy with unasked questions. He did not ask why I came at such hour. He motioned to a low wooden stool near his bench, handed me a strong cup of tea, and told me to sit while he would take my shoes. Warm yellow light fell across the workbench, where sat a small tray of insoles, a box of needles and thread, several slender knives, tins of polish, an old wooden ruler, and a sheet of brown paper with many foot imprints. He said, "Each foot has its own map. A craftsman merely reads it to see where to reinforce, where to lighten, where to leave it be." He turned my shoes, observed the worn patches, tapped the heel lightly. There was a soft thump I had never noticed. He said my heel was unevenly worn, meaning I have been walking off balance for some time. Perhaps in haste, perhaps carrying some weight to one side, perhaps avoiding something ahead. I laughed, asking how shoes speak so much. He smiled. "Shoes don't speak. Your steps speak, and steps speak in silence." He handed me another sheet of brown paper. He told me to place my bare foot on it, press gently, then lift. A faint imprint remained. The front was dark, the heel light. He marked 4 points with a pencil and explained, "These are the 4 spots I had been pressing down hardest over months. If I continue, not only shoes wear out, the body does too." I looked at the print and realized that over the past year I had learned to carry burdens with my head, letting the feet run below. So at night of inner turbulence, my feet did not know how to pause. He pulled from a drawer a thin insole of leather soft material, cut it along a slight curve, inserted it in the heel of my shoe, and said, "Try standing." I slipped my foot back in and stood. Instantly I felt something small but big. The heel lifted a bit. The body's weight shifted. My spine relaxed. My shoulders ceased striving to carry an invisible weight. He said many think they need new shoes, but often all they need is a new way to stand. That phrase felt like a window opening in my mind, a breeze passing through just one stream, enough to push aside the ifs crowding the hallway of my thoughts. He worked slowly, unlacing, brushing away dust, polishing in circles, small, then larger, as though sketching ancient orbits around a weary planet. On the wall hung a warped clock, discarded by others. Its second hand moved unevenly, pausing now and then. I asked why he does not fix it. He replied, "I keep it crooked so the shop remembers that sometimes a pause is good. It reminds a person to inhale before stepping again." I told him I often stay up late thinking, remembering every task, imagining tomorrow's responses, wanting immediate answers. He listened, polishing still, then said half joking, half seriously, "One stitches a shoe tongue stitch by stitch, not by grasping an entire bundle of thread and trying to force it into one hole." I burst a surprised laugh, feeling that line strike home. He told me, "When your mind wants to run, turn and ask your feet, 'Do you wish to run?' If the feet say no, you sit. Sitting is a gesture of the feet, not the head." The shop's drawer is labeled "Box of Things Forgotten from Pockets." Inside are old bus tickets, a key that opens nothing, smooth pebbles, a worn coin, a scrap of paper reading, "Remember to buy salt," a scratched black and white photo. He said people lose or intentionally leave behind things, some burdens light in themselves but heavy to carry. Let the shop keep them. I asked how he returns them. He said at dawn he opens the drawer, places everything on the counter, and lets objects choose their owner. Anything unclaimed goes into a glass jar on the windowsill, and the wind carries them away. I opened the drawer, saw those small items, and felt that inside me another drawer, too full, longed to open to let wind in. He handed me a small paper slip. Whenever you overthink, write exactly 4 lines. See, name, let sit, and promise dawn. I dipped the pen, etched those 4 lines like a ticket for the rowdy passengers of my mind, signed it with a long breath, folded it into the box of things forgotten from pockets. Strangely, the moment the slip touched those little burdens, my head felt lighter. He showed the insole he trimmed under the lamp, slipped it into my shoe with care as though hiding a seam on a garment's inside. He told me to try walking. I did. A few steps on the wood floor. The click of my soles felt answered by the floor in a steady rhythm, no jolt, no haste. Those first steps felt like rain washing a forgotten basin. I made a circle. My knees opened. My hips let go. My spine ceased scanning. My feet accepted the ground as a thick mat. He returned to the bench, wiped the shoe's surface, then pressed his palm lightly on its toe as one might whisper to something delicate. He said shoes have 2 voices, one for the road, one for the wearer, and when those voices align, walking does not tire. I paused. I felt a quietness in my interior voice, a realization that tonight's task was not to defeat my thoughts, but to sit long enough that my feet may learn to stand still. As polish soaked in, he shared. In youth he was a mail carrier, walking the alleys daily. At night, his heels would ache. Once he considered quitting. An old woman near a market gate looked at his worn heels and said, "You walk too hastily. The heel will wear out. Walk more gently, and mail still arrives." He said that night he began to read the map under feet. He showed me a worn book. Each page contained a footprint of someone he helped. Beside it, small notation: excess forward pressure, add heel pad, big toe gripping in anger, lighten load, relax by walking barefoot on grass 5 minutes each morning. I read them and realized this cobbler is a craftsman of paths. He pointed to a board on the wall. In pencil: stand right, walk slow, pause firmly, then sleep. He said those are the 4 reminders he repeats nightly, because if he forgets, his hands do haste, eyes decide fast, and heart is pulled along. I nodded, remembering how many nights I leapt from standing into racing without pausing. Pausing, I learned, is an act of bravery. Outside, the sky lightened, milky. Dawn's first rays slipped through cracks, lighting the scratches on his workbench like handwritten lines of some old soul. He returned my shoes with newly built heels, the toe polished gently, laces threaded softly as though speaking unhurried words. He charged me, wrote on a brown slip of paper, stamped it with a footmark. I held the shoes but did not leave yet, wanting to sit a little to hear the shop's silence, a silence not of emptiness but fullness. He handed me a small pouch containing 2 thin pads and a handwritten slip. On it were the 4 lines he calls homework for walkers. Before stepping out each morning, place hand on heart for 3 beats. Then place eyes on the ground just ahead. Ask where your force needs more, and where it needs less. Finally, promise your head that questions that need not answer now will wait until evening. I folded it, put it in my wallet like a simple direction. I laced my shoes, stood, bowed. At the threshold, I paused exactly 1 breath as per his wall admonition, then stepped into the street. The early air was fresh as young leaves. The pavement was mottled with dampness. The park behind the shop exhaled its scent through houses. I walked, aware that each step felt slightly different, and that little difference echoed through the rest of me. I passed a dark shop window, saw my reflection. My shoulders no longer braced upward. My eyes were not chasing answers. My brow was softened. I thought of coming nights, when ifs might flock back like birds. But I know if they return, I will set my shoes by the bedside, place my bare feet on the floor, sense the ground's coolness, then invite each if in, offer it a chair, and promise to walk only when morning calls. I no longer seek to drive away thoughts. I wish to teach them to walk beside me without toppling. That evening, before sleeping, I placed my shoes at the head of the bed, toe pointing toward the door, a sign that tomorrow's path is ready. I sit, lay the brown paper on my table, write the 4 words: see, name, let sit, promise dawn. Then blow out the small inner flame with a breath shaped by steps. As I lie down, I hear the bed answer my back, the air answer my nose, my heart answer my heartbeat. Between those answers lies a sliver of quiet, like a white mark on a dark road that tells the traveler exactly which way to go. I cross that sliver like stepping over a low bridge. No grip, no hesitation. Sleep comes not demanding, but holding a map drawn in brown paper, beginning at the soul and leading straight in toward peace. Story 10: A morning with no name. After the night's rain, the city still holds transparent droplets along the edge of corrugated roofs and on the leaves of the banyan tree at the alley entrance. Each droplet hangs like a small bell in the air. A gentle breeze brushing it causes a very thin chime. In that pale dawn, down a narrow alley lies a loft room with a wooden window frame faded by sun and wind, where a young man often sits awaiting the sunrise, like awaiting a friend who never sets an appointment but always arrives on his own schedule. He has spent many nights in that way, long nights like a road with no signposts, where questions stand in line within his mind, each holding a placard reading if or must. Whenever he tries to sort them, the placards shuffle themselves, narrowing the path more and more. Last night, rain came late, lingering long, tapping on the metal roof like someone keeping rhythm for a wordless song. He sat listening to the rain as though listening to an elder telling tales, slowly repeating, pausing where needed, then exhaling. When rain ceased, he opened his window, not wide, but just enough to let a sliver of wind slip through, carrying the scent of damp earth and banana leaves from the neighboring house's roof. He sat in that breeze, asking nothing, not planting banners of expectation in his mind, just sitting as a keeper might when the owner is away, his job to guard a small lamp on the table. In his room is a simple wooden desk. On it, an antique desk lamp, a glass vase with a few slanted bamboo branches, a cup of tea still warm, and a thin brown notebook. He had not written in the notebook all night, rare, for the nights before he would catalog every passing thought, as though inventorying goods, trying not to lose even the smallest. But tonight he only turned to a blank page, laid his hand over it like one rests on a soft pillow, letting the paper carry a beat in place of ink, and considered that enough. In a corner is a low wooden chair. It is not beautiful as in photographs, but it is comfortable for long sitting without hurting the back, because its backrest curves to a person's spine, reminding him that even common objects can remember the presence of living bodies. A memory more subtle than any theory he has read. On the wall, a thin beige curtain sways in the breeze, projecting uneven ovals on the pale gray dawn wall, like someone writing words of light on a wall, words needing not to be read, only to be received. He rises, walks barefoot to the window, touches the wooden frame, feeling the old paint's roughness under his fingers, sensing the humidity pulling away from the air as though a guest leaving quietly. Down the alley, wet from rain, the paving bricks shine faintly. Old patches of mud trace narrow lines like veins on the hand. A street sweeper passes by, bamboo broom whispering across stone. He pauses at a fallen leaf, gently pushes it aside so it may roll into a corner. Far off, a bread cart begins to stoke fire. Thin smoke threads upward, then fades, All of this plays out like an unspoken ritual. He feels the urge to name the morning arise, then recede, like a breeze brushing the curtain. He remembers a teacher in a small hill hermitage once said, "Some mornings need no name, for naming is framing, but the morning wants opening." He allows the morning to remain open like a window, and wonders, what if today he does not call it busy or idle, good or bad, but simply here? He boils water quietly, not at a fierce boil. He pours into his cup. Steam rises in its own language, the language of water tracing its journey from cloud to roof to teacup. He carries the cup to the windowsill. A leftover drop still clings under the window wood. When he exhales, it falls. The fall is faint, but he hears the gentle tap on stone. The sound reminds him of an elevator indicator tone in a building where he once worked, softer and without urgency. On a rooftop across, a line of sparrows hops in their sparrow rhythm, quick but leisurely, each short leap, then pausing to spread wings in sunlight. He smiles, a smile for no one, one that needs no witness. In that moment, a phrase that had kept him up many nights rises and fades away. Not because he solved it, but because it no longer wishes to cling. He does not chase it out, nor hold it in. He stands still and allows it to move through, like the scent of new grass drifting across a yard. Soon, he opens the brown notebook and writes 4 short lines, 1 word each. See, call, allow, breathe. After writing, he places the pen down and regards those 4 words like 4 empty chairs around a wooden table. He imagines that tonight, if questions return, he will invite them to sit in those 4 chairs, no chair higher than another, then pour each a cup of tea from this pot, telling them first to smell before drinking, and he too will smell before speaking. He senses that those simple 4 words may do a hard task, shifting the role in his head from stern gatekeeper to a gentle host. He does not know from where he learned this, perhaps from the midnight noodle shop down a nearby alley, the shoe repair near the park, the all-night library, the mountain suspension bridge, or the candle in a stone hermitage. But he knows that each of those had led him to one same truth. Life must sometimes be laid down before being lifted. It must be heard before being understood. It must breathe before being named. Below on the street, a bicycle rolls by. Tires hiss in puddles, then go silent. A child holding his mother's hand stands by the alley, eyes wide at the droplet hanging from the eaves. The child lifts a hand to touch it, but the mother gently shakes her head. The drop falls. The child laughs at the smallness of the magic. The laugh drifts upward, brushing the loft room wall, then dissolving into a ray of light. He sits on the windowsill, sips tea, thinks of work waiting, letters to reply, half-closed appointments, but those thoughts stand politely in line, not crowding, like guests learning to wait their turn. He does not rush to resolve. He begins writing a little letter to himself. Today we will slow where slowness is needed, and focus force where force is needed. When thoughts run, place hand on table and wait 3 beats. When others speak fast, listen to part and leave the rest for afternoon. If rain meets us on the street, stand under an eave, smell the rain, offer no curses, for rain is rain and an eve is an eve. He closes the notebook, stands straight, stretches shoulders, breathes in and out, sensing his spine shift softly, a hinge well-oiled. He grabs the jacket behind the door, slips arms through slowly, zips halfway, leaving a gap for air to pass. He picks up his folded umbrella, opens it quietly, listens to the cloth stretch, then closes it and sets it by the door, for now not needed. He puts on his shoes, ties them snugly but not too tight, reminding himself of the old shoemaker's lesson. A full stop is a step, too much tightness is a habit. Before stepping out, he glances back at the room, the chair, the desk, the vase, the teacup, the notebook, all in place, quiet as thoughts set to rest. He turns off the lamp but leaves the window ajar, as if letting the morning stay to wait for him, not locking, Not shutting, only trusting. He steps onto the stairs. The worn wood replies under his feet, each tread sounding a note in a rhythm, not the beginning. Not a climax, just the middle of a song. He descends, inhales the scent of old floors, dampness, aged paint, dry rice from a neighbor's house, layered like the bass lines in a symphony often missed when ears chase louder sounds. Into the alley he walks, greeting the street sweeper, the vendor at the alley entrance, the early cyclist. Approaching a busy road, he stops before the crosswalk, watches the pedestrian light change. He does not rush, does not force crossing early, no longer needing to prove anything. He thinks of his office, colleagues, calls. He tells himself, today. Before each answer, pause to breathe. Like the space between rain and earth, he steps across, back straight, shoulders lowered, lips soft as carrying a smile not yet fully formed. As his foot lands on the sidewalk, he senses a tiny chord in his heart sing, just one note. Brief, enough to tell him that from now on, each morning he can choose not to name it, but let it speak itself in light. In that moment, between two beats, he hears a whisper he's waited to hear. You slept enough. Now go. No rush. The day is here. Story 11. The pottery workshop at dusk and the turning wheel. Late afternoon in the outskirts carries a light unlike the city's. It is not harsh yellow, not blazing orange, but like a thin milky veil laid over tin roofs and over bougainvillea vines that are past their bloom. A breeze blows across the dry fields, carrying the scent of earth that once was wet. At the side of a dirt road sits a small pottery workshop, open until the fire in the kiln no longer glows. Inside are the smells of clay, ash, and glazes not yet fired, all mingling into a scent capable of pulling a person out of the questions in their mind and down into what lies in their hands. The old potter sits there, his figure bent just enough to show that he has lived by his back for many years. His hands are thick, like two well-worn books. Traces of white clay dust cling under his nails. His mouth smiles before his eyes do. His gaze is soft, like ivory glaze. I arrived after a long day in which my mind had roared like a train station without a schedule, thoughts launching forward then slamming brakes. Passengers fighting for seats, an invisible public address system repeating the same line. I no longer wished to sit in that station. I greeted him, asking just to sit in a corner view, not to speak, only to hear the turning wheel. He nodded and pointed me to a low wooden stool. Before me was a throwing wheel with a chipped edge. On its surface lay a lump of wet clay, just lifted from its water basin, heavy, steady. He placed the clay in the center of the wheel, brought his palms together, pressed down with his foot on the pedal. The wheel turned slowly, then steadily. The clay began to tremble with a vibration that only clay understands. I heard the breath of water, his skin sliding across the surface. A very small whisper, like a tired child wanting to tell one more story. He said, "Go slow first. Wet, wet so that clay softens and welcomes your hands. If not wet, the clay will crumble. Too wet and it will slip. Wet just right. Then everything obeys." I looked at the clay, still just a nameless lump, but under his hands. In a few pulses it chose a direction, a form. He said, "Now is the time to pierce the center." He pressed two fingers lightly into the middle. The wheel turned steadily, and a round hollow opened like a well. He did not force, only held, letting the wheel help. In that moment I realized something that needs no words, that in most of my attempts to touch a problem, I do the wheel's job. I press, I rush, I forget to be gentle and let the turning rhythm produce the hollow. I forget to keep the center steady. I asked him, "What is the hardest step?" He laughed and said, "The hardest step is sitting correctly. If you sit wrong, your hands twist. When hands twist, the form warps. When form warps, your whole life of pottery will be crooked." Sitting correctly means your hips relaxed, your back straight, your shoulders low, eyes lowered just enough, See from the level of the clay, not from a level of wanting to conquer. After hearing that, I rested my back on the stool, let my shoulders drop, and felt my vertebrae respond with a small sound, like a hinge newly oiled. He said, once you have the hollow, you will raise the walls, but raising is not pulling, not jerking. To raise is to go slowly, to ride your hands up the clay as though riding a gentle horse. The lower hand supports, the upper hand guides, each lift only a little. Do not be greedy, for thin and tall is the most likely to collapse. I watched him dip his hands into a bowl of water, lift them, water trailing in threads, rubbing evenly over the clay as it rose. I heard his breath. As far as the breath goes, the clay goes too. I understood that breath itself can be a shaping tool, if one allows breath to speak with the hands. At times he paused, the wheel continuing. He only watched, not touching. He said there is a passage in which you must let the clay decide whether it wants to lean or stay straight. Touch too soon, and you deny it a chance to speak. I nodded. This was something I could not do with my own thoughts. I touch again and again, adjust again and again, trying to pull them upright, and in intervening too much, I make them collapse. He turned to me. People imagine they are rescuing the clay. Actually, most often, the clay is rescuing the person, teaching one to slow down, teaching one to see, teaching one not to shout into the clay's ears. Outside the workshop came sounds of children running, sandals slapping the ground, laughter mingling with someone's kitchen smoke, wind tilting through the doorway, brushing glazed strips hung to dry. They sang lightly like leaf bells. I asked to place my hands on another lump. He nodded, handed me a smaller piece, placed it on the wheel, and said, think of this clay as a tired heart after a long day. Do not force it to become something immediately. I wet my hands. The wheel began slow, then steady. The clay, cold at first, then warm from my hand's heat, stirred. I tried the centering, my hand trembling slightly. The hollow came off center. He did not criticize. He said crooked is also a direction. I raised the walls. They wavered. I heard my own heartbeat, its rhythm unclear because my ears heard the wheel and my eyes watched the path of my hands. He placed his hand over the back of my hand, as gently as placing a small bird on a branch, and whispered, you do not need to win. You need to stand in the right place. I lowered my shoulders a bit more, let my breath go down into the belly. I raised again. This time the wall rose like a long relieved sigh at last released after years of holding. I smiled, a gentle smile that I almost forgot I could have. He said, that is it. To raise is to listen. On the shelf behind him sat bowls already dried, waiting to go into the kiln. Each bowl bore an unintentional fingerprint on the inner rim. He said that fingerprint was the signature of that day, recording the mood of the hand. Hiding nothing, he showed me one bowl cracked at its foot, telling me this was the lesson from last week, when he let himself be hurried by the clock. He put it into the kiln too early. The clay had not rested, and the crack was the clay saying no. I remember nights when I forced myself into the kiln too soon, demanding an answer immediately, heating something not yet dry, and the next morning I felt as worn as a broken shard of pottery. He held a fine nylon thread, slipped it under the base of a shaped piece, pulled it through, detaching it from the wheel, and set it onto a flat board. He called that step cutting away, and explained that without cutting away there is no standing alone. Without standing alone you cannot enter the kiln, cannot endure the heat. I listened, feeling a choking in my throat as I realized that all this time I had not been able to cut questions loose from the wheel of the day. I let them cling, spinning forever, into night, and I told myself I could not sleep. He scooped water from a small basin, sprinkled it over leftover clay scraps, kneaded them again, saying clay does not spoil, it only tires. Rest a while and it listens again. He asked me which things I needed to knead again. I laughed and said many. From how I read an email, to how I promised to myself, From how I tie my shoelaces in a rush to how I pour a glass of water. All needing to loosen rigidity. He gave no direct advice. He handed me a cloth and told me to wipe the wheel. I wiped in circles. Each round a thin layer of clay dust disappeared. The wheel surface revealed fine scratches like stardust marks on the afternoon sun. I saw myself doing something small but right, and right was enough. At least for now. Darkness deepened. He stoked the kiln. The sound of wood into flame was like turning thick book pages. The red glow crept deep into the belly of the kiln. Heat began to exhale from the small door crack. I sat further back but still felt warmth on my cheeks. It was the heat of work that will continue even after the worker has returned home. He said, "Firing is trust. Trust that what has been done is enough. Trust that fire has its work. Water has its work. The hands have theirs. The night has its part." He told of a time he stayed up all night, fearing the fire would falter. Morning came and the kiln was fine. But he was exhausted. From then on he learned to let the kiln guard itself. I looked at the flame. It was not as fierce as I once thought. It resembled a friend, passionate but with a good heart, if unprovoked. It does not destroy, if given tools. It helps, if spoken with in rhythm. It listens. He returned to the table, placed in front of me a brown paper, a pencil, and told me to record 4 lines to take home. I asked what to write. He said, "Just write 4 actions from this afternoon." I wrote, "Wet, center, raise walls, cut away." When I finished, I held those 4 words like 4 short paths opening into a new small town in my mind. A place where the wheel always awaits. Where a small water basin sits. Where an old craftsman knows how to smile with his eyes. And where a flame does its work without demanding the work of another. He folded the paper, put it in a small pocket, and handed it to me. He said, "When you lie down and your head spins, take out the paper, place it on your chest, read the 4 words silently, do the 4 actions from the heart, and leave the rest to the night." I nodded, my heart light as having just set down something no longer fitting me. Before leaving, I asked if I could buy a bowl still warm. He shook his head. "A bowl must sleep in the kiln. Come back in the morning. If any bowl calls for you, you bring it home." I went out to the porch. The wind had grown colder. A narrow streak of light remained in the west sky. Bats began slanting letters across the darkness. I turned to look once more at the kiln, at his hands slowly moving to tidy, at the wheel now stopped. Its surface darkened. I thought that stopping is another kind of spin, the turning of silence. The dirt road guided me to the highway. The traffic thinned. Yellow streetlights made the edges of leaves shine like copper. I removed my hat and let the wind touch my hair. In that wind I heard clearly the 4 small beats in my chest, like 4 light taps from the potter on the body of a bowl asking, "Can you stand steady?" That night I went home earlier than usual, turned off lights, poured a glass of water, and placed the brown paper on the bedside table. Without opening my phone, I sat at the bed's edge, placed the palm of one hand into the other, feeling warmth there growing like a lump of clay just needed. I lay down, pulled the blanket across my chest, and silently read the 4 words. My head wanted to run, but I told it, first wet, meaning let the eyes see a blur on the ceiling instead of focusing on the dense thoughts in your mind. Then center, meaning imagine 2 fingers touching the midpoint of your chest and breathe. Then raise walls, meaning let the breath become a shaping tool. Each inhale and exhale only a little. Then cut away, meaning tell questions. Now you stand apart. We will meet again tomorrow. I did the 4 things. No more, no less. Then I was still, as though carriages rolling away from a station. The announcement stops. The wheel sleeps in my chest, and in exactly the space between an inhale and an exhale, something placed a hand on my brow so gently, not the old potter, not flame, not wind, but a part of me long unspoken. It whispered a sentence I could hear. Sleep now. The kiln is watching. In the morning we re-enter the kiln. I smiled, did not reply. Letting sleep come by the road, I walked through the workshop, without hesitation, without fear of darkness, because in my hand lay those 4 brown words, and in my heart a bowl still warm waiting to be placed on the table of a new day's beginning. Story 12. The Night Weaving Workshop and the Threads That Don't Tangle. In the outskirts lies an old factory area hidden behind rows of eucalyptus trees. By day it mostly stays closed, for people go elsewhere to work, but at night it lights up a streak of yellow lamps like a little stream flowing through the dark fields. At the end of that stream of light is a weaving workshop run by a family of 3 generations. Tied to their loom, the corrugated roof gleams with old rain stains. The blue sliding doors paint flakes off, and inside is the smell of fiber dust, oiled wood, and hot tea. The loom's clack is not as loud as factory machines in the city. It taps evenly, half a beat off a clock, each strike like a raindrop falling on a roof, then changing mind and rolling down the eaves. I came there after a day when my head was full of threads, thought threads tangled into a coil with no start or end. The more I tried to untangle them, the more they knotted, the more they knotted, the more I felt like throwing them away. But then I would feel regret. The night felt long, like a road with no signposts. The master weaver is a woman in her 40s. Her face sun-kissed, hair tied neatly, eyes bright yet calm. She sat behind the loom, feet moving the pedals, hands passing the shuttle, her upper body held straight like bamboo. Occasionally she paused to smooth a horizontal thread before slipping the shuttle through. I hesitated standing there. She looked up, smiled, motioned to a small stool placed at the edge of the loom, and said, "Sit. Tonight we weave raw silk. The sound will not be loud, just enough to hear." I sat and watched her hands. Before me a piece of cloth was emerging, a beige ground, undyed, and as weaving advanced, I saw the cloth's surface unfold like a road. Wherever I walked, the pathway remained smooth, unpretentious, but solid. She set down the shuttle and poured me a cup of tea. The steam rising and mingling with the scent of cotton fibers made a mild, warm fragrance. She asked why I came tonight. I answered that in my head I had a forest of threads, tugging and pulling each other, and I could not sleep. She nodded, not rushing to advise, only pointing to the cloth, saying, "Look closely." I looked and saw the warp threads, tight, regular, upright. They were the framework of the fabric. She told me the warp threads are the unchanging things in a day, like the earth, like mealtimes, like breathing, like things you must do but done in your own rhythm. The weft threads are the things that come and go, stories, phone calls, messages, a cloud drifting to shade then vanish. If you forget to stretch the warp threads, the weft will always fall short. If you ignore the weft, the cloth is only framework, never becomes a garment. I felt as though I had been handed a map. All along I kept holding only the weft threads, demanding weaving in the air, so they drifted and got stuck wherever. She pulled a weft thread and placed it in my palm. The thread was cool, light, slightly textured. She said, "Tonight, of all the weft threads you carry, pick just 3 and name them." I closed my eyes and named them one by one. One was a conversation I regretted not having. One was worry about the upcoming exam. One was the feeling of insufficiency I had felt too long. I opened my eyes. The 3 names appeared on the inner surface of my palm like faint trails of light. She told me, "Once you name them, try passing each thread one by one, not in haste. Slide the first thread through. Tap it lightly once. Set it down. Then breathe." I followed, imagining passing the first thread, tapping its end with my fingertip on the loom's edge, a small sound like a period, then breathing. The second thread, same motion. The third thread, my hand trembled more, because it was sticky. Wanting to pull back, she placed her hand over mine and said, "The thread that is stubborn. Loosen your grip and maintain rhythm. Don't pull harshly. Rhythm is what listens. Pulling is what it resists. I tried loosening and found that my inhale and exhale became an invisible shuttle passing back and forth. Strange thing. The third thread stopped resisting. It lay gently on the cloth, finding its place. On the wall beside the loom was an old wooden board. On it hung a few lines in brown faded ink. Just 4 lines. Tighten right. Insert just so. Tap lightly. Rest completely. She said those were the 4 words her mother left behind. I asked what rest completely means. She smiled and said, it means when finishing a thread, you must come to a full stop so the thread lies down. Not weave while still trembling. Many who come to learn here keep their feet moving, their hands passing shuttle, their mouths telling themselves to rest. But their rhythm hasn't rested. The cloth looks smooth but will warp over time. I thought of nights I'd put down my phone but eyes still reading. Pulled the blanket up yet my hands drafting replies in my mind. I told myself I was resting. But my rhythm would not rest. The cloth of those nights warped, and no one else was to blame. She handed me a new spool of thread, ivory in color, and told me to feel it. The spool fit well in the hand. The thread was thick enough, not easily broken. She said not every thread works for every cloth. She opened a small box containing many paper strips holding sample threads, each marked with short notes. Use this thread on rainy days. That one on hot days. Soft thread when tired. Uniform thread when mind tangled. Silken thread when steady. I laughed. So threads have climates. Days and nights too. She laughed with me, saying people think weaving is technique. Really it's first listening to fiber fragrance, humidity, sweat, breeze, then choosing. I understood that when my thoughts grow dense, I keep trying to weave with coarse thread of logic, so the inner fabric is rough, already rough, wanting smooth too soon, so I scratch it by forcing. If that night I had chosen a uniform thread, used breath as shuttle, perhaps it would have been different. A little boy, her child, ran in. He flopped onto the floor holding a tangle of threads like a bird's nest. He looked up and asked his mother, "Shall I cut and throw it away?" She shook her head and said, "Bring it here." She sat, put that tangle on her lap, left hand holding, right hand untwining ring by ring. Her lips silent, eyes slanted as though listening to music. I asked, "How do you know where the knot is?" She answered, "The knot lies where tension is least, where pulling meets resistance. Listen with your hand." I said my head cannot hear. She smiled kindly and said, "Teach the hand first, then the head will remember." She unlinked one ring, then another, and the tangle shrank into a usable spool. The boy ran to a corner and hung it on a wooden peg, exclaiming he had made one more spool. I watched and felt my heart soften. I realized I too carry a tangle tonight, and at least I had placed it properly, on my lap, not tossed into a dark corner. Behind the loom was a long table. On it sat a weaving comb, a small mallet, and a thick notebook. She opened the notebook for me to look through. Inside was the weaving schedule for several months. Which days to weave, which days to rest the loom. Afternoons when strong wind required slower weaving. Mornings when humidity demanded longer drying of threads. Nights when tired eyes required early stopping. I read it and felt as if I were reading the breathing schedule of a body. She said a clever weaver is the one who does not weave on the days that need not be woven. I laughed. It sounded like a joke, but in truth it was right. I thought of nights when I forced myself to read one more chapter, write one more passage, plot one more plan, while my body begged for rest, and in the morning the fabric was exhausted. My head creased. After a while, she stood and invited me to try my foot on the loom's pedal. I sat in position, hands on the rim of the loom, feet touching the pedal. She told me not to begin the rhythm right away. First watch and breathe. I looked at a row of warp threads. They stood like reeds resisting the wind, and I took a breath or two. She said now begin the rhythm, not forcefully, just evenly. I moved, Heard wood strike wood, like bamboo calling to each other across a hill. I passed the shuttle, slightly off. She did not correct me, saying just let a stitch slack sometimes. The cloth needs a rest note. I continued. A strange feeling rose in my shoulders, that I was doing a small but right thing. Each beat was like an ant carrying a grain of sand. No cheering, no urging. A short stretch of fabric appeared beneath my hands. I set the shuttle down and stopped completely, just as the wooden board instructed. I sat quietly, listening. The night through the eucalyptus rustling. Neighboring workshops silent. The kettle on the charcoal stove raising its heat a notch. At the little window hung a strip of paper made from dried banana leaf. On it were 4 practices for the sleepless, copied by her mother from her grandmother. Place your hand on your belly to feel breathing. Place your eyes on a small detail to stay present. Place your feet firmly on the floor to remember earth. And place your worry on a flat surface so it will lie down. That surface could be the fabric, a paper, or the palm of your hand. I read them, noticing each begins with place, place down. All this time I had been hanging things, hanging questions up high, hanging expectations, shame, even joy, making a ceiling full of unshed drops that spill with a little shake. To place down seemed to be tonight's lesson. She handed me a small cloth pouch sewn from leftover fabric, telling me to carry it to hold threads I have named. When you're tired, just take out the pouch, touch the thread, and remember the thread is just thread. The fabric is what you want. I held the pouch, light, like a message without exclamation. I rose, thanked her. She nodded and escorted me to the door. Outside, the moon had not yet risen, but the sky was like someone sweeping a thin layer of light, enough to see car streaks on the ground. The wind through the eucalyptus whispered things to each other that did not need human understanding. I walked to the gate, turned to look. Inside the workshop only a small lamp glowed and a solitary figure sat collecting the shuttle. I knew the night would continue weaving more silence for the houses near and far. Once home, I did not reach for my phone. I found the small cloth pouch, opened it, placed the 3 strands I had named on the table. I poured a glass of water, placed it beside me, and wrote the 4 words, tighten right, insert just so, tap lightly, rest completely, on a small paper. Tacking it to the edge of my bed, I dimmed most lights, leaving a single small lamp like a firefly hiding in leaves. I lay on my side, hand on my belly, nose near the edge of the blanket to feel the fabric brushing my skin. My feet placed firmly on the mat before I drew them up to the bed, a greeting to the earth. Then I placed worry down on the flat surface of the mattress, watching it lie still, no longer wanting to stand. When old thoughts crept, I moved my fingers like the loom's shuttle. 1, 2, 1, 2, very slowly, letting an invisible shuttle carry breath. No victory cry, just 4 small actions done. And just then, between 2 finger beats, I heard as though someone whispered in my ear words not demanding understanding. Tonight we weave not to wear it immediately, but so that tomorrow there is a calm cloth ready. And so the weft thread lies down. The warp threads stand still. The loom in my chest ceases to strike, and sleep arrives gently like a thin cloth laid over the shoulders of a person who has just stopped sitting up in the night. Story 13. The early morning ferry dock and the rhythm of rowing in the chest. The river this season is not loud. The water moves like someone who understands courtesy. It touches the shore, then steps back half a pace, so the bank does not feel offended. The ferry dock in the outskirts opens earlier than even the rooster. On the thin wooden waiting roof, dew forms rounded droplets. A gentle breeze passing by makes them fall as though someone lightly plucked a string of glass bells. I arrived while the night had not quite ended, carrying the clutter in my head of a grocery shop refusing to close its ledger. The ifs lined up as in a counter queue, each holding a slip of request, and I was the keeper of inventory, so weary that smiling was all I could manage. I sought a place where speaking was unnecessary, only sitting. The old ferryman was already awake, heating water in a kettle. The tea steam stretched a thin trail across the dewy air. He nodded in greeting, not asking why I came so early, offered me an old wooden chair facing the water, and said, "Sit first. Listen to the river." The ferry dock bore a faded wooden sign, its letters just legible. On it were 4 brief lines. "Sit before you cross. Look at the water before you step. Give small change before moving dock. Breathe fully, then speak." I read them and smiled to myself, for those 4 lines felt like a small ritual for those who have forgotten courtesy toward themselves. The ferryman leaned his paddle against the railing and said in a warm voice, "Like a cup of tea, the river has its own rhythm. The ferry's job is to catch that rhythm. Those boarding need only shift rhythm. Then it works." He did not try to teach me anything, only invited me to listen. The sound of water at the ferry's prow was a whisper. Rope scraping a post was like scratch paper. The oar stirring was like someone waking a child without frightening them. In those sounds, my head ceased its dancing. A woman bearing a bundle of vegetables stepped down to the dock. The greens were rain-wet, the smell of fresh-cut leaves drowsy. She set her carrying pole down, sat beside me, her plastic sandals askew, feet planted firmly on the planks. She did not glance at a phone or a watch. She looked at the river as one looks at an acquaintance across the road. When the ferry drifted away from shore, she laid her hand on her knee, closed her eyes a moment, then opened them and smiled gently. I asked where that habit came from. She said whenever the ferry leaves the shore, she lets one worry go into the water. Not throw, but let go. After that, she sits still and lets the water do the work of water. When it lands on the far shore, that worry is no longer in her hands. Hearing that, I felt there had been a cloth pouch I had been carrying crossbody, stuffed with matters, dry ones, wet ones, broken ones, intact ones. Turns out I had never once let one go. The ferryman drifted the boat downstream, then paused midstream, and said that today the water rides soft, stand in the midst and listen. He braced the paddle, the boat slightly turned, and the river beneath became a misty mirror. He said the river taught him 2 lessons. First, nowhere on the flowing water does any place stay still forever, so do not resent a ripple for tipping the boat. Second, no boat is obliged to return to the old dock if a new bank has emerged. I hugged those 2 sentences as one would hug a dry cloth. They promised nothing, but were warm. He told that when he was young he rowed hard, thinking speed was skill, but when his shoulders ached, arms tired, his boat would often list. Then once in thick fog he lost sight of shores, hearing only water, and in that whiteness he understood that to move one must listen. To row is to listen, not perform. Each ferry trip is like a breath. On the far bank sat an old woman selling small packets of sticky rice. Steam from her basket climbed like a small cloud. On this bank a boy practiced shuttlecock kicking, the shuttlecock bouncing up and down like an unanswered question. I looked at all of it and felt the day lose hard edges. It became round. The ferryman handed me a tin cup and said, "Drink." The tea was neither strong nor weak, like the night distilled to its final drop. I drank, feeling a small warm line from throat to chest, answering a cold region that had existed since last night and that I had not acknowledged. He asked if I had been able to sleep. I shook my head. He nodded and said, "Then stay for one more trip. Let rowing teach rhythm." The ferry left again. The water's surface deepened like someone adding ink to a painting. He dipped the paddle, lifted it. Water dropped as strings of beads, the sound like pins tapping against a stretched drum membrane. He said, "To sit and hear one true rhythm is always easier than sitting battling an imaginary orchestra in your mind." I asked, "If the ifs pull forward too long, what then?" He smiled and said, "Give them tickets to stand, and invite them to stand at the stern of the boat. The bow is for silence. Let the noisy ones stand behind. Don't expel them, just separate places. When the boat docks, they'll step off themselves. I thought of nights I had placed all noise at the head of the bed, then blamed the hard mattress. Perhaps I need to switch places. Midstream, a small fishing boat drew its net. The net was not heavy, but he pulled slowly, pausing after each haul to look, not rushing. I asked why he did not haul in all at once. The ferryman replied, "If he pulls all at once, the eyelets in the net may get snagged. Tears come unseen. Pull in a stretch, pause, inspect, mend. That keeps the net strong. A person's life stays strong if one allows pauses." Hearing this, I remembered a day I ran from dawn to dusk, finishing one task then plunging into the next, never stopping, my pen still hot, palms sweating, eyes reading while my heart already wanted to sob. Looking back, I realize I broke my own net by insisting I was unbreakable. The opposite bank drew near. The ferryman turned the paddle, brought the boat against a wooden post, the post vibrating like a spine being aligned. He dropped the rope and asked if I wished to disembark. I shook my head, saying I wanted one more round. He nodded, without a laugh. On the third trip, the ferry was empty. The mist thinned. Revealed were tufts of silvery reeds, water hyacinths drifting like stories no longer provocative. I sat mid-boat, hands on my knees, like someone placing two smooth stones by a hearth. The ferryman rowed more slowly now, and said, "Now hear your own rhythm." I closed my eyes, not to sleep, just to listen. I felt my heart throb an irregular beat at first, then settle into steadier pace once my mind stopped commenting. I felt breath drop into the belly like a small sandbag, not painful. Just weight settling in silence. I noticed a question I had chased all week naturally sit into a chair at the stern of the boat. Legs swinging, mouth yawning. I said nothing to it. The ferryman whispered that if it wants to sleep, let it sleep. For the first time in many weeks, I believed I could let a question rest. On a dock post hung a few old ferry tickets. No one tore them. Those who passed through the dock would drop a small coin in the box and take a ticket as a keepsake. The ticket bore a date not quite whole. Thin printed letters. Each had a small stain from the hand that held it. I took one. My thumb touched the worn ink, and my palm felt a faint, cool dampness. The ticket bore 3 words: "Drift in peace." I tucked the ticket neatly in my pocket. The sensation like placing a leaf in a book to keep the scent of dawn. The ferryman looked at me and asked, "Do you wish to place a worry in the water?" I thought a moment, then softly spoke a name, and released it like a dry seed into the current. It did not sink at once. It drifted with the film on the water a stretch. Turned, then continued. No applause, no record, no reproach. I felt myself withdraw a bit, just enough that my back could straighten. When the sun lifted a thin streak of light above the distant horizon, fireside smoke from the rice fields wrote words into the sky. The ferryman extinguished the small coal stove, packed away the kettle, and resumed rowing in silence. I asked if there was anything that urged people to come to the dock each night. He said there were just 4 small acts. Place yourself on the seat before placing a question. Place your gaze on the water before placing your eyes on a screen. Place a small coin in the box as you would place a word of thanks. Place your breath into your belly so the boat has water. After hearing them, I saw those 4 acts like 4 oars in a little boat that anyone can row inside their room, even living amidst the city. I politely asked to leave. He handed me a small brown slip of paper, showing a boat rowed by a single person. Beneath the image were 4 short words: sit, see, release, breathe. He said, "If in days to come the night grows thick, just open your window, place the slip on the sill. Imagine your room as the dock, your bed as the boat, then do those 4 acts. If you are too weary, just do 2. Sit and breathe." I thanked him, placed the slip in my wallet, and found my mind no longer tangled. I stepped ashore. The ground beneath my feet was softly firm, neither sinking nor hard. I turned and saw the ferry slowly depart. the ferryman's figure shrinking amid the mist, the oar tracing a curved path, like the signature of a kindly knight. Back home, I did not turn on the big light. I poured water, placed the glass by the bedside, cracked the window just enough for a breeze. I placed the "Drift in Peace" ticket on the table. Beside it the slip with the 4 words. I sat by the bed, back against the wall, both feet resting on the floor, eyes fixed on the place the wind entered, lips silent. I let my body become a little boat, let my belly be water, my back the mast, the bed the dock, my head the shore, and let the ifs stand at the stern, not crowding the bow. I did not chase, did not advise, did not try to be clever. I did as the old ferryman instructed. I sat, I saw, I released, and I breathed. After a few breaths, I perceived the closed door of sleep crack open, a sliver of light, not blazing, but real. I stepped in as one boards a ferry, no pushing, no scrambling for place, no fear of drifting. I heard an oar stroke very faintly somewhere in my chest, steady, soft like a song with no singer. And just in the space between 2 strokes, a voice close said, "Sleep. The far shore awaits, no name needed, only peace." Story 14. The glass house on the roof and the gentle rain in the watering can. The city lights come on like a blazing map, and amid countless bright squares there is a quiet rooftop where the owner built a small greenhouse from old pine wood and salvaged glass. Every night, when the clock neared midnight, she opens the door to the roof so a breeze from the city drifts through her hair, then pushes gently open the greenhouse door. Inside is the scent of damp earth and fresh leaves, of resinous wood still fragrant, of old water in the drip trays. Neat little beds are laid out, not for beauty, but for ease of tending, nested among pots of basil, dill, mint, a tomato clump, a few strawberry plants, and some small cacti. Each thing has its own rhythm. Strawberries need whispers. Mint likes the sound of trickling water. Cacti prefer silence. She knows this not from books, but from long nights spent listening. And gradually she changed her own rhythm to harmonize. She had suffered many sleepless seasons. Thoughts unfurled like a midday downpour on a tin roof. Relentless, washing every answer out of reach. She tried every remedy, from task lists to minute evaluation charts for every conversation. But the more she wrote, the heavier the burden grew, and soon her body bent like a fruit-laden branch without support. Then once, passing through an old market, she saw people selling paint-splattered glass panes and wooden beams dismantled from a warehouse. She bought all of them, hands stained but heart open. On the day she finished building the greenhouse, the sky poured a light rain. She stood under the glass roof smelling the earth, and suddenly understood that some questions only need to be placed in the right spot. They change shape themselves. Tonight she carried a small watering can, the kind with a long spout and a fine spray nozzle. The can was dull metal, the bottom bore a streak of silver paint. On a low wooden table in the greenhouse she placed the can beside a brown-covered notebook, a garden pair of scissors, a coil of twine, and a cup of warm water. The low-hanging yellow light cast a soft glow on leaves, making everything seem alive, breathing. She did not hurry to water. She stood still, listening to the city. Cars in the distance. The elevator hum from the building next door. A door closing somewhere below. Closer in was the faint drip of water leaking through the spout because the lid had not been screwed tight. That sound was like someone whispering, "Do not rush." She tightened the lid. The water fell silent. Quiet dropped like a thin blanket. In one corner of the greenhouse hung a wooden board inscribed with 4 lines she had written near the beginning of this place. The letters were slightly skewed, the brown ink aged, but still warm. Place down. Water just enough. Cut away. Wait to grow. She reads those 4 lines nearly like a small ritual. Place down means set your worries down at the door, not lock them, not shove them away. Just let them lean against the wall like soggy umbrellas. Water just enough is to do what's needed, but don't pour the whole can into one pot out of fear. Nor be stingy to a parched plant. Cut away is to clip off the withered leaves, the diseased buds, branches losing their light, so the plant feels lighter. Wait to grow is the hardest. It demands shoulders that no longer strive to command. She lifts the watering can, tilts gently over the tomato pot. The water parts into countless droplets, each droplet seeking a leaf surface, a grain of soil. She moves to the strawberry patch, pauses at a leaf with a small hole eaten by a pest, places a fingertip on the leaf rim, gently snips away the infected portion. No regret, because regret would darken the rest of the leaf. She thinks of days when she regretted a flawed sentence, replaying it in her mind until the remainder of the day turned forlorn. Clip decisively, but in the right spot, at the right time, and with clean hands. Clean hands are hands that do not smear the soil of anger onto wounds. A small nocturnal moth alights on the frame of the door. She watches it carefully. Moths here do not destroy, they only visit. She cracks open the door for fresh air. The moth flutters off, leaving behind a subtle vibration in the air like a fine thread. She sits on a wooden chair, opens the notebook, and writes 4 headings she had promised herself last month. In the morning, place hands on soil before hands on phone. At noon, drink a glass of water standing by the window. In the afternoon, walk slowly across 3 stairs. At night, read a page of a book without title. She has kept some, left others incomplete. She marks a small check next to the gaps, not as punishment but as marking a bed sown but not yet sprouted. She gazed at the seedling tray placed next to the window pane, where rows of seeds were breaking their shells. What always made her smile was this strange moment, when the sprout's tip meets the soil, its head still wearing the cap of its shell. Awkward, pitiful, and yet lovable. She reminded herself not to rush to remove that little cap, because in a few hours it would fall on its own, and any meddling hand would only wound what was about to become beautiful. She remembered the questions inside her own mind. Some were just cracking open, and she had once tried to peel them to see inside, and all that remained was a ragged white fragment. Since she built the greenhouse, she peels less. She lets the sprout do its work, while she does hers. Keep warmth, keep moisture, and wait. Footsteps sounded on the neighboring roof. A neighbor was watering plants. 2. They did not see each other, only knew one another by sound. The neighbor's steps were slower than before, meaning they, too, had learned rhythm. She suddenly thought of something she had promised to do days ago but had not yet called to refuse. Out of shame, fear of bothering, wanting to preserve an image, the mint plant beside her suddenly released a strong scent. Like a reminder, mint is always direct. She set down the watering can, picked up her phone, and dialed. She spoke a short refusal, light, unembellished, without pulling more threads. On the other end there was one silent second, then agreement. She exhaled, realizing she had just pruned an old leaf. The dust of mint felt noticeably lighter. She moved to the cacti. Cacti disliked too much attention. She poured a ring of water around the pot rim, not onto the body. She learned this after killing one from over-tenderness. She reflected on care and over-care. To care is to understand rhythm and distance. To care too much is to wipe out rhythm and shorten distance. Over-care causes rot. The same with people. She jotted a line in her notebook, reminding herself to call her cousin tomorrow, and say she will listen without trying to fix. At the rooftop's edge she placed a pebble pot, inside which lay a small painted brick. On that brick were the 4 words she had found one morning at the ferry dock: sit, see, release, breathe. Each night after watering, she brings that brick where the wind can read it. Tonight was no different. She placed it in its spot, secretly smiling at her own silly habit of hiding things, and found the habit as endearingly childish as a child concealing an apple behind their back even while half of it shows. She returned to check the tomato trellis, loosen where it's tight, Tie wear slack. Adjust binds that risk brushing glass. Tying is an art more delicate than it seems. Too tight, break. Too loose, flop. Ties too many, knot. Too few, plant leans. Finding the right tension is a stretch of listening with one's hands. She thought of how she ties plans in her mind, many threads. Tangled, trying for firmness but ending in mess. She resolved to untie one thread, that is, drop a plan from next week. She recorded its name in her Passover section, a page she added recently, leaving blank the reason line. No need to justify letting go. Letting go is reason enough. On a small shelf by the window stood a transparent glass box. She called it the rediscovery box. Inside were trivial finds from shirt pockets, the porch, drawers, a shirt button, a bicycle ticket, a scrap of paper reminding to buy salt, an old hair tie, a pen cap. She keeps them not out of regret, but because those fragments testify a day once passed. On nights she feels empty. She opens the box, touches an item, recalls a brief moment, then closes it. That is how she refuses to demand greatness of each day. She allows a day simply to be real. She blew out a small lamp, leaving only the warm ceiling light and the white city glow through the glass. They crossed on the table where the watering can was half emptied. She drank the remaining warm water, set down the cup, hearing gently the ceramic tapping wood. She opened the glass door, stepped onto the rooftop edge, looked down at the street. Late walkers still hurried. A few windows glowed bluish. A young couple stood on a balcony across the way. She held a thin blanket. He leaned on the railing. They looked in a direction she could not name. The city breathes through countless vents. The glass house breathes through the small slit of its door. She went back in and finished watering the seedlings, then propped the can upside down to dry. She gathered fallen leaves, placed them into the compost bin, sprinkled a bit of coffee grounds, dripped a few drops of water, covered the lid, wrote today's date on a slip, and taped it on. Composting is an art of waiting. She has learned patience in that bin more than from any book. All things old, fragmented, broken, when placed rightly and given just enough moisture, warm themselves and transform into nourishment. Her mind, too, felt like it had a compost bin, holding stories yet unresolved. Anger not dispersed, regrets not settled. Tonight she would add a small scrap to it, the impulse to justify her refusal. She did not write a reason. She let the compost bin keep it. Wind grew stronger. Scattered raindrops, out of season, struck the glass, tapping, tap tap, like many fingertips pressing the tabletop with deliberate rhythm. The rain was soft, just enough to sheen the leaves. She re-angled the strawberry pots to catch diagonal droplets. She suddenly felt her eyes heavy as a flower fully moistened. She moved her chair to a corner, leaned back, half closing but not leaving the glass house. She wanted to enter sleep with a "thank you" in her chest, and that needed a few seconds to form. She murmured thanks. To the leaves she pruned, to the water that fell just enough, to the small brick that remained still, to the compost bin working in darkness, to herself for not opening her computer upstairs. When she rose to return to her room, she turned off lights, leaving the greenhouse to the white glow of night. She closed the door, latched it with a small wood peg. She descended the stairs, stepping lightly as though across low musical notes. In her room she did not turn on the big light. She poured a little water into a glass by her bed, cracked the window slit, drew the curtain halfway. She placed her brown notebook on the small table, set the pen across the cover, took a blank sheet, and wrote the 4 words cleanly: place down, water just enough, cut away, wait to grow. She taped it inside her wardrobe door, the first thing she would see tomorrow morning. She lay sideways, hand over her belly, imagining it as a bed of soil. Inhale equals moisten, exhale equals rest, inhale equals moisten, exhale equals rest. In her mind still dripped a few scattered thoughts, but not enough to cause noise. A soft breeze passed through, From the glass house above drifted the scent of mint. Faint. Within that faintness formed not words but a movement. That movement reached out, supporting her across the threshold. The threshold was low, just one doorstep. On this side lay wakefulness, on the other, sleep. She stepped across it as one would step down a path between two lines of trees. No applause, no naming, no landmark, only a watering can left inverted, a compost bin warming quietly, a brick lying under the wind, and 4 words taped to the wardrobe. Tomorrow morning when she awakens, she will brew warm water, climb to the roof, open the glass house door, inhale the scent of earth, greet every leaf. But now, sleep touches her forehead like a raindrop on glass, sliding down, vanishing, leaving a thin mist that only someone standing very close would see. That faint mist is the doorway of a peaceful night. Story 15. The antique clock shop and the silence between ticks. On the old street a row of low houses lies half hidden beneath the milk tree's shade. And tucked in the middle is a small clock shop that keeps its door ajar until late. The wooden sign has faded, the painted letters dim, yet anyone passing by recalls immediately the smell of that place. Metal mingled with machine oil, old wood, and a layer of a scent hard to name, like time at rest. Inside the shop hang countless clocks, pendulums, wall clocks, mantel clocks, pocket watches. Some run steadily, some stand motionless like sleeping birds. Some need just the lightest touch to nudge the second hand one notch, then stop again. The shopkeeper is an older man, his hair silvered in the glow of lamps, with sinewy but calm hands, hands that know how to place themselves on a clock face as one would on a fevered brow. I came there after a day in which my mind roared with ceaseless ticking, as if inside my chest several clocks were all running at once, each in conflict, one urging speed, one urging slow, one asking why, one threatening if not, and in that cacophony I could not hear the breath of my own self. He did not ask many questions, only offered me a low wooden chair beside his workbench, poured a cup of tea from a yellowed porcelain pot, and told me to sit and listen. So I listened, not with the noise of a marketplace, but many tiny sounds touching each other, the pendulum tapping the air, a spring exhaling, the second hand stepping forward, glass vibrating when the door creaked. Curiously, a little while later, what I heard most clearly was not the ticks themselves, but the silence between tick and tack. That silence is as thin as silk, unnoticed by many, but once heard, you sense it is the ground on which time plants its feet to move forward. He placed on the table before me an old mantel clock, its wood case brown, its dial yellowed, the hands thin like dried leaves. He turned the winding knob gently, the second hand edged forward. Tick, tack sounded cleanly, not rushed. He spoke softly. A clock runs not because the hands move, but because there is a place for them to stop. Without stopping, there is no going. When I heard that, I felt a lung inside me open. Behind him on the wall hung a small board with 4 lines written in ink. For teaching clock repair apprentices. Here first. Remove precisely. Clean thoroughly. Reassemble correctly. He told me a person's life is not so different from a clock brought to this shop late at night. Here first is to look inside the mechanism, not judge too quickly. Let sound speak. Remove precisely means know which screw must come off, which bolt stay. No disorderly dismantling or you ruin the threading. Clean thoroughly is letting go of thickened old oil, hardened by fear and neglect. Reassemble correctly is returning each gear to its place, fitting gently, not forcing. He handed me a loupe and told me to peer in. In the lens was a sparkling microcosm of gears and axles, cogs interlocked like promises of faithful time. I asked why some clocks run slow, others fast. He laughed. Many people overwind the spring, thinking faster is better. Others clamp the escapement too tight for fear of error, making the hands afraid to move. I thought of myself. Nights I wombed the spring of my thoughts taut. Days I squeezed all gaps shut, thinking emptiness was waste, and understood why the hands within me seldom moved in proper tempo. A customer came in carrying his grandfather's old pocket watch. The crystal was scratched, the brass case dull, the back engraved with partial script made faint by time's sweat. The keeper took it, opened the back, tipped an ear to listen, then smiled and said it just needed a bath. Bath was how he referred to cleaning off the old oil. He laid the watch on thick cloth, opened his toolkit, and with delicate screws worked step by step. 3 small trays sat labeled with pencil, screws, gears, springs. He said novices often make haste, toss bits, misassemble, and in their dreams at night, watch parts chase them. I laughed, realizing I too dismantle my day's tasks indiscriminately. No tray labeled, and by evening when trying to rebuild, I don't know where to begin. He nodded gently, as though he heard laughter echo in my throat. He gave me a sheet of brown paper and asked me to draw the 3 trays. I drew them. On tray 1 I wrote tasks needing immediate attention. On tray 2 tasks that can wait. On tray 3 tasks best dropped. My hand wrote slowly, my letters rounding, my mind cooling. In the shop stood a large clock long stopped. The hands read 7:55. He would not repair it. He left it there, right in the spot people notice first upon entering. I asked why. He said to remind that some things standing still are necessary. The other clocks run. This one rests, and thus gives the room an anchor. He told me that in youth he wanted all clocks to run. As a homeowner wants every lamp lit. Only later did he understand a home is more beautiful for its darkness. Seeing that immobilized clock, I found in my heart a silence needing no justification. He finished the pocket watch, oiled a little, cleaned, and reassembled. Each action followed the rhythm he already had in hand. A rhythm not governed by any clock in the shop, but by his own breath. He said a good clockmaker is one with tender lungs. I asked how to have gentle lungs. He only smiled and handed me a small air blower to clear dust from the dial, then told me to listen again to the ticking. I obeyed. Some old dust burst loose, and the ticking became clearer. He said small dust dulls the true sound. People are the same, daily reminders cling like dust on glass, if not cleaned. Night will muffle the truth. A boy entered and stared intently at a pendulum clock swinging in the shop window. He asked why it swings. The keeper knelt to the boy's eye level and said, "Because it has permission to sway." The boy's eyes widened. He added, "It swings back and forth to keep rhythm. It does not tire. It does its job by going and returning." I heard that and felt a window open further in my mind. Go and return. Think and place down. Do and stop. No side to those phrases should feel shame for being quiet. The boy asked to hear the clock's hourly chime. The keeper gently adjusted it, waited for the right minute, and at the strike the bell rang deep and full, not harsh, but like tapping a palm lightly. I saw the boy smile, and I smiled, too, with a muscle rarely used. After a while, the keeper brought out from his cabinet 4 different clocks, a wristwatch, a small table clock, a little wall clock, a pocket watch. He told me to pick one to represent today. I chose a simple steel wristwatch, white face, no numerals, only minute markers. He asked why. I said because it has few words. He nodded and said, "Now wear it for a while without looking, only listen." I closed my eyes, raised my wrist to my ear, and listened to the second hand. The sound was steady, not loud. He said, "Now walk 3 steps to that rhythm inside this shop." So I walked. Step 1, step 2, step 3, then paused on a tick. My body felt a subtle alignment, as though a sliding door had settled into its track. He told me, "When you return home, before sleep, you may walk 3 steps in your room in that rhythm to remind your lungs of tempo." Not many, just 3. On the counter stood a wooden box labeled, "Lost and Found." Inside were small scraps of paper people had written while waiting. Anyone could drop in a note, and on leaving take one if it spoke to them. I opened the box, read a few. I feared silence would judge me. I wished to slow down, but feared others raced. I dreamt of winding endlessly while the hands stayed still. I folded those notes back, placed them, then wrote a line for myself. I will practice hearing the silence between two strikes. I dropped my note in the box, and felt my heart lighten as though I had placed a screw in the correct tray. One night, walking deeper into the streets, the lamplight grew thinner. Inside the shop, the wall clocks all struck the hour in turn, bells echoing layer upon layer, near then far, sounding like a gentle rain of tiny drops on a corrugated tin roof. The owner looked up at the ceiling, silent, as if listening to a melody he knew by heart. Then he turned to me and said simply that it would be best to go home and sleep. He did not give a long speech. He took from a drawer a slip of brown paper, on which he hand wrote 4 words, very soft, sounding like detach, wipe, assemble, wait. He folded it and handed it to me, telling me that if any night my mind was noisy, I should place that paper on my chest, close my eyes, and do each step in order. Detach means sit still for a moment, and do not touch your phone. Wipe means write out 3 tasks and postpone one to another day. Assemble means drink a small sip of water, exhaling longer out. Wait means turn off the light, lie on your side, place your hand on your belly, and promise until morning. He smiled and said clocks are not to be rewound in the night, and neither should people. I stood and thanked him. He also gave me a small self-printed ticket. On it were 4 succinct words, placed between 2 ticks of time. I took it and put it into my wallet beside the brown paper. I stepped out of the shop. The night breeze brushed my forehead gently. I walked slowly along the old sidewalk, following the rhythm of 3 steps, pausing 1 step as he taught. The street was quiet. The trees had just shaken water onto the ground. The scent of milk flour was no longer rich but only a subtle trace, like salt in soup. I returned home. I did not turn on a bright light, only a desk lamp. I poured water, placed the glass beside the bed, and set my phone far from my hand. I took the brown paper, placed it over my chest, and read the 4 words silently. I sat and listened, not long, enough so the clocks inside me would quarrel less. I opened my journal, wrote down the 3 remaining tasks, and crossed out 1 to delay. I drank a sip of water and exhaled a long breath, the breath sliding past my neck like a thin oil on a dry axle. I switched off the light, lay on my side, hand on belly, promising until morning as one promises an alarm. No need to count sheep. I only listened to the silence between the 2 heartbeats of myself. Silence that tonight widened like a threshold just cleaned. And in that space, so softly, like a second hand touching a mark, a voice familiar yet ever new whispered, "Sleep now. Tomorrow the hand will move again." When the last story closes, you may feel your heart like a lake's surface that has just stilled. All the day's sounds have dissolved, leaving only gentle breath and a steady pulse in the chest. Zen stories do not promise to erase all troubles, but they may place a small stone in your mind, so that whenever the wind comes, you remember the lake can ripple yet remain clear. If tonight you find sleep comes more gently, or you simply feel your heart slow just a little, then these stories have done their job. Let sleep guide you through the brightness and darkness within your mind. And when morning opens your eyes, just remember the new day need not be perfect, just present. Thank you for listening until this moment. If these stories reached even a small corner of your heart, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share so others too may find a peaceful night of their own. I wish you deep sleep, gentle dreams, and awakening with a spirit as light as the morning breeze. I look forward to meeting you again in the next Zen Stories, where we continue learning to sit still amid motion, hear in stillness, and smile when dawn opens its eyes.